What's going on, everyone? It's Fiction Domain here. We've got something amazing for you today. What if Harry visited Gringotts at age 7 and purged the dark magic Dumbledore hid inside him? Real quick, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join thousands of story lovers and hit that subscribe button. Alright, story time. Chapter 1, The Letter from Nowhere. Harry Potter woke with a start, his small hand flying to his forehead where the lightning-shaped scar burned as if someone had pressed a hot coal against his skin. The nightmare faded quickly, green light, a high-pitched laugh, and screaming, leaving only the familiar ache behind. Morning light filtered through the slats in the cupboard door. Harry sat up carefully, avoiding the low ceiling that had given him too many bumps to count. 7 years old and still growing, but not quickly enough to satisfy Aunt Petunia, who called him Runty when she was being kind. He fumbled for his broken glasses, held together with tape that Dudley had graciously allowed him to take from the school supply closet. The world came into slightly better focus. Another day at number 4, Privet Drive stretched before him, likely filled with chores, Dudley's taunts, and the particular brand of neglect the Dursleys had perfected. Boy! Up! Aunt Petunia's sharp rap on the cupboard door made dust fall from the ceiling. Breakfast won't make itself. Coming, Aunt Petunia, Harry called back, his voice still rough with sleep. He quickly pulled on Dudley's hand-me-downs, the t-shirt hanging nearly to his knees and the trousers rolled up multiple times at the ankles. As he pushed open the cupboard door, Harry's scar gave another painful throb. He pressed his palm against it, wondering why it had been hurting more lately. The kitchen gleamed with Aunt Petunia's obsessive cleanliness. Uncle Vernon sat behind his newspaper, only his bushy mustache visible as he grunted acknowledgement of Harry's existence. Dudley was already at the table, shoveling eggs into his mouth while simultaneously playing with a handheld video game. Bacon needs turning, Aunt Petunia said instead of good morning. Harry dragged a step stool to the stove and carefully flipped the strips of sizzling bacon. His stomach growled. He'd been given only bread and cheese for dinner the night before, punishment for a math test score that had suspiciously exceeded Dudley's. Something came for you, Uncle Vernon suddenly said, his voice filled with the kind of false casualness that immediately put Harry on alert. Harry turned, surprised. Nothing ever came for him. Uncle Vernon held up a cream-colored envelope between two thick fingers. Addressed to Harry Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. His small eyes narrowed dangerously. No stamp. No return address. Care to explain? Harry stared at the envelope. I don't know anything about it. Of course you don't, Uncle Vernon said, his voice rising. Just like you don't know how you ended up on the school roof when Dudley and his friends were chasing you. Just like you don't know how your teacher's wig turned blue. Just like, Vernon. Aunt Petunia hissed, shooting a meaningful glance at Dudley, who had finally looked up from his game with interest. Not now. Uncle Vernon's face had progressed from red to purple. He shoved the letter into his jacket pocket. You'll get no letter, boy. No one has any business writing to you. But it's addressed to me, Harry protested, forgetting himself in the excitement of receiving his first ever letter. Shouldn't I at least know? Uncle Vernon slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes jump. I won't have it, you hear me? I won't have any of that unnaturalness in my house. Unnaturalness? Harry repeated, confusion and curiosity warring in his mind. Uncle Vernon stood so abruptly his chair fell backward with a crash. You're on thin ice, boy. One more word and you'll be in that cupboard until Christmas. Harry turned back to the bacon, which had begun to burn. He flipped the strips quickly, his mind racing. What could be in the letter that would upset Uncle Vernon so much? And what did he mean by unnaturalness? Throughout the day, Harry couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious letter. Uncle Vernon had burned it in the fireplace before leaving for work, a savage smile on his face as he watched the edges curl and blacken. But that night, when the house was quiet and the Dursleys were asleep, Harry snuck out of his cupboard and carefully examined the fireplace. Among the ashes, he found a partially unburned corner of the envelope. The paper was thick and expensive feeling, not like the thin bills and advertisements that usually came through the mail slot. And there, in rich green ink, was part of a strange emblem, what looked like the letter G with something curving beneath it. Harry tucked the scrap into his sock and returned to his cupboard. He'd never felt so determined about anything before. Someone had tried to contact him, Harry Potter, the boy no one wanted. Someone out there knew he slept in a cupboard under the stairs. And Harry was going to find out who. The next morning, Harry was sweeping the front walk when he noticed something odd, a raven perched on the garden wall, watching him with uncannily intelligent eyes. As Harry stared back, the bird hopped closer and dropped something from its beak. A letter. Identical to the one Uncle Vernon had burned. Harry glanced quickly toward the house. Aunt Petunia was watching one of her soap operas, and Dudley had gone to Piers Pocus's house. Moving casually, Harry picked up the letter and tucked it into the waistband of his oversized trousers, covering it with his shirt. He continued sweeping, heart pounding, until he finished the chore. Then, muttering something about checking the garden hose, he slipped around the side of the house where a small cluster of shrubs offered privacy. With trembling fingers, Harry opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written on the same cream-colored paper, in the same emerald green ink. Dear Mr. Potter, it has come to our attention at Gringotts Wizarding Bank that you have not been informed of your heritage or the accounts maintained in your name. This is a serious breach of Goblin banking protocol and Wizard-Goblin relations. We request your presence at your earliest convenience to discuss these matters and to perform standard heir verification procedures. This letter will serve as a portkey at your command. Simply hold the letter and clearly state Gringotts to be transported directly to the bank. Due to the unusual circumstances surrounding your case, we have taken the liberty of temporarily bypassing certain ministry restrictions. This exception expires at midnight on July 31st. May your gold flow and your enemies tremble. Gornick Potter, Account Manager, Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Harry read the letter 3 times, his confusion deepening with each reading. Wizarding Bank. Goblin banking protocol. Portkey. None of it made sense. And yet, hadn't strange things always happened around Harry? The incidents Uncle Vernon had mentioned, ending up on the school roof, the teacher's wig turning blue, plus dozens of other unexplainable occurrences. The snake at the zoo that had seemed to understand him. The time Aunt Petunia had cut his hair almost to the scalp, only for it to grow back overnight. And the nightmares. Always the nightmares, accompanied by the pain in his scar. Harry carefully folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. If this was some elaborate joke, the kind Dudley and his friends might play, he'd look foolish. But if it wasn't? The sound of the television switched off inside the house. Harry quickly tucked the letter into his sock and returned to his chores, mind whirling with possibilities. That night, after the Dursleys had gone to bed, Harry sat in his cupboard with a dim flashlight he'd rescued from Dudley's discarded toys. He reread the letter, focusing on the instructions. Simply hold the letter and clearly state Gringotts to be transported directly to the bank. It sounded impossible. Magic wasn't real. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia had made that abundantly clear whenever Harry had shown interest in fantasy stories at school. And yet, Harry clutched the letter tightly in his small fist. What did he have to lose? If nothing happened, he'd be no worse off than he was now. But if something did happen, if there was a wizarding bank, if he had accounts in his name, if magic was real, then everything would change. Gringotts, he whispered, his voice barely audible even in the silence of the cupboard. For a moment, nothing happened. Harry's heart sank. Then he felt a peculiar sensation, like a hook catching him behind the navel, and his cupboard dissolved around him in a whirl of color and sound. The world rematerialized, and Harry fell forward onto a cold marble floor, his glasses askew and his stomach churning. When the dizziness subsided, he looked up, and gasped. He was in a vast, opulent hall made of white marble. Enormous crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting dancing light across the polished floor. But it wasn't the grandeur that made Harry's jaw drop. It was the creatures manning the high counters that lined the hall. They were short and swarthy, with pointed ears, dark clever eyes, and very long fingers. Some wore tiny spectacles perched on their long noses as they examined jewels or counted coins. Others were scratching in ledgers with quill pens. Goblins. They had to be goblins. Harry climbed shakily to his feet. He was wearing pajamas, Dudley's old ones, with holes in the knees and faded superheroes across the chest. He felt terribly out of place in this magnificent building, but none of the goblins seemed to pay him any mind. Gathering his courage, Harry approached the nearest counter. The goblin behind it was counting ruby-red stones, stacking them in precise piles. Harry waited, unsure of the proper protocol. When the goblin finished his current stack, Harry cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, his voice small in the cavernous space. "I received this letter." He held up the cream envelope. The goblin peered down at him over half-moon spectacles. "Name?" "Harry Potter, sir." The effect was immediate and startling. The goblin's eyes widened, and he leaned forward to examine Harry more closely. His gaze flicked to Harry's forehead, where the lightning scar was partially visible beneath his unruly black hair. "Indeed," the goblin said, in a tone Harry couldn't interpret. He pressed a small bell on his counter, which emitted a sound like distant wind chimes. "Wait here." Harry stood awkwardly, aware of the curious glances he was receiving from both goblins and the few humans in the hall, all adults wearing strange robes rather than normal clothes. He pulled self-consciously at his oversized pajamas. A moment later, another goblin appeared. This one was older, with wispy white hair sticking out from behind his ears and deep lines around his shrewd eyes. "Mr. Potter," the new goblin said with a bow that managed to be both respectful and intimidating. "I am Gornick, manager of the Potter accounts. Please follow me." Gornick led Harry through a set of burnished bronze doors and down a torchlit corridor that sloped gently downward. They passed several heavy wooden doors before stopping at one marked with a symbol that looked like a stylized P intertwined with a lily flower. "The Potter family crest," Gornick explained, seeing Harry's curiosity. He pressed his palm against the door, which swung open silently. Inside was a comfortable office with dark wooden furniture, richly colored tapestries on the walls, and a crackling fire in a small hearth. Gornick gestured for Harry to sit in one of the chairs facing a massive desk. "You are no doubt confused, Mr. Potter," Gornick said, taking his own seat behind the desk. "I apologize for the abrupt manner of your arrival. Circumstances have forced us to act outside our usual parameters." "Am I really at a wizarding bank?" Harry asked, unable to contain himself. "Indeed you are," Gornick said, a hint of amusement in his gravelly voice. "Gringotts has served the wizarding community for centuries. We goblins pride ourselves on our financial acumen and discretion." "But I'm not a wizard," Harry protested, though even as he said it, a part of him wondered if that might explain so many strange occurrences in his life. Gornick's bushy eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Not a wizard? Mr. Potter, you are not only a wizard but the heir to one of Britain's oldest magical families." He narrowed his eyes. "What exactly have your guardians told you about your parents and your heritage?" "That my parents died in a car crash when I was a baby," Harry said. "That my father was unemployed and my mother was. He trailed off, unable to repeat the unkind things Aunt Petunia had said about her own sister. Gornick's face darkened, and for a moment, he looked truly fearsome. "A car crash. James and Lily Potter were murdered, Mr. Potter, by the darkest wizard of our age. They died protecting you." His voice softened slightly. "They were heroes in our world. And very wealthy ones, at that." Harry felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. "Murdered? By a dark wizard?" "His name was Voldemort," Gornick said, watching Harry closely. Most wizards still fear to speak it, referring to him instead as, you-know-who, or, he who must not be named. He led a reign of terror against Muggleborns, wizards born to non-magical parents, and those who opposed his vision of pure-blood supremacy. And he killed my parents? But why? Harry's voice cracked. That is a complex question, with answers that may be beyond my knowledge, Gornick said carefully. What is known is that on Halloween night, 1981, Voldemort came to your home in Godric's Hollow. He killed your father first, then your mother. But when he attempted to kill you, a mere baby, something extraordinary happened. His killing curse rebounded, destroying his physical form and leaving you with nothing but that scar. Harry's hand moved automatically to his forehead. The scar that had been burning more frequently lately. The scar from which his nightmares seemed to emanate. You became known as, the boy who lived, Gornick continued. The only person ever to survive the killing curse. A celebrity in the wizarding world, though it appears you've been kept ignorant of this fact. Harry's mind was reeling. Magic was real. His parents hadn't died in a car crash but had been murdered by an evil wizard. And somehow, inexplicably, he had survived a curse meant to kill him. But why am I living with the Dursleys? If my parents were wealthy, if I'm famous, in the wizarding world, why was I left with people who hate magic? Who hate me? Gornick steepled his long fingers. That, Mr. Potter, is a question we have been asking ourselves with increasing urgency. According to your parents' will, which was properly filed with both the Ministry of Magic and Gringotts, you were never meant to go to Petunia Dursley. They had a will. Harry leaned forward. Indeed. Your parents named Sirius Black as your guardian, with Alice Longbottom as an alternative should Mr. Black be unable to take you. Gornick pulled a scroll from a drawer in his desk. Unfortunately, Mr. Black was imprisoned shortly after your parents' deaths. Mrs. Longbottom was incapacitated around the same time. This created a legal vacuum that Albus Dumbledore exploited to place you with your mother's sister. Dumbledore? The name was unfamiliar to Harry. Headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, Gornick recited, his tone suggesting these titles didn't impress him. A powerful wizard with many connections and a penchant for, shall we say, arranging matters to his liking. But why would he want me to live with the Dursleys? Harry asked, bewildered. They're terrible. They make me sleep in a cupboard. Gornick's expression darkened again. A cupboard? When Harry nodded, the goblin muttered something in a harsh, guttural language that didn't sound complimentary. This is worse than we suspected, he said finally. Mr. Potter, when our monitoring spells detected unusual magical fluctuations around your person, we initiated a standard review of your accounts. What we found has led us to believe that Albus Dumbledore has been working against your family's interests, and possibly your personal welfare, since the night your parents died. Monitoring spells. You've been watching me? Harry wasn't sure whether to be comforted or disturbed by this revelation. Not exactly. The Potter vaults are ancient and contain powerful magical artifacts. As account manager, I place standard monitoring charms to alert me to any unusual magical activity that might affect your inheritance. Gornick's expression became grave. What I did not expect to find was evidence of dark magic emanating from your very person. Harry's hand went to his scar again. From my scar? Gornick nodded slowly. It appears so. And this is where matters become both complicated and disturbing. The magical signature we detected suggests that a fragment of foreign magic has attached itself to you, specifically, to your cursed scar. Our preliminary analysis indicates this fragment may be connected to the wizard who gave you that scar. Voldemort? Harry whispered, a chill running down his spine. Yes. Though how this came to be, and why Albus Dumbledore, who surely must have detected it himself, left it untreated, are questions that demand answers. Gornick stood and moved around the desk. With your permission, Mr. Potter, I would like to perform a more thorough magical examination. It won't hurt, but it may feel unusual. Harry hesitated only briefly before nodding. The scar had troubled him all his life, and the thought that it might contain something dark, something connected to his parents' murderer, filled him with resolve. Gornik raised his hands and began to mutter in that same guttural language. His fingers moved in complex patterns, and a soft golden glow emanated from them, enveloping Harry in gentle warmth. The sensation was indeed unusual, like being immersed in a bath that tingled against his skin, but not unpleasant. Harry remained still, watching as Gornik's expression shifted from concentration to shock to a cold anger. After several minutes, the golden glow faded. Gornik lowered his hands, his face grim. "It is as I feared, and worse," he said quietly. "The fragment in your scar appears to be a soul shard, what wizards call a Horcrux. It is among the darkest of magics, created only through deliberate murder, splitting one's soul to achieve a twisted form of immortality. There's a piece of Voldemort's soul in me." Harry felt sick. A small fragment, yes. Likely created unintentionally when the killing curse rebounded. Most concerning is that our diagnostic magic detected traces of binding spells and magical suppressors that appear to have been cast by Albus Dumbledore himself. Gornik's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. These spells seem designed to contain the Horcrux but have the side effect of drastically limiting your natural magical abilities. You mean Dumbledore knew? He knew I had this thing in me, and he just left it there. Harry's shock was giving way to anger. It appears so. And more troublingly, he seems to have deliberately suppressed your magic rather than removing the foreign soul fragment. Gornik returned to his seat. "Mr. Potter, I must be frank with you. The presence of a Horcrux is extremely dangerous. It can influence thoughts and emotions, drain magical energy, and potentially allow the original soul's owner some measure of control over the host. Can you get it out?" Harry asked urgently. "We can," Gornik said, his tone cautious. "The Goblin Nation possesses cleansing rituals that predate wizard magic. But I must warn you, the procedure is not without risk, and it will be uncomfortable." "I don't care," Harry said firmly. "I want it gone." Gornik studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Your courage does honor to your parents' memory, Mr. Potter. Before we proceed, however, there is one more matter we should address." He pulled another scroll from his desk. "This is a summary of your financial holdings. I believe you should understand what resources are at your disposal." Harry unrolled the scroll and felt his eyes widen. The Potter family vault contained what seemed to him an astronomical sum of gold, along with properties, investments, and heirlooms. He had a separate trust vault for his education, set up by his parents, which contained more money than Harry had ever imagined possessing. "All of this is mine?" he asked, his voice small. "Indeed. And as the last of the Potter line, you are entitled to claim your status as heir apparent, despite your young age. This would grant you certain legal protections that might prove valuable, given the circumstances." Gornik withdrew a small box from a drawer. "This is the Potter heir ring. If you choose to claim your status, the ring will recognize you as the rightful heir and provide a measure of protection against certain magical influences, including, potentially, the negative effects of the Horcrux until it can be removed." Harry opened the box to find a heavy gold ring with a dark red stone. Engraved in the stone was the same symbol he'd seen on the door, the stylized P intertwined with a lily. "What do I need to do?" Harry asked. "Simply place the ring on the index finger of your dominant hand. If it accepts you, it will resize itself to fit." Harry, who was right-handed, took the ring and slipped it onto his index finger. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he felt a warm tingle as the ring shrank to fit his small finger perfectly. A soft golden glow surrounded the ring briefly before fading. "The ring has accepted you as the Potter heir," Gornik said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Now, Mr. Potter, if you are ready, we should proceed with the cleansing ritual." The longer the Horcrux remains, the more difficult it may be to remove. I'm ready, Harry said, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. Gornik led him out of the office and deeper into Gringotts. They descended in a cart that moved with breathtaking speed through a labyrinth of tunnels, plunging ever downward until they reached a cavernous chamber far below the bank. The chamber was circular, with a domed ceiling from which hung crystal formations that emitted a soft blue light. In the center of the chamber was a raised stone dais surrounded by pillars carved with runes. The air felt thick with magic, not the gentle golden warmth of Gornik's diagnostic spell, but something older and wilder. This is the Chamber of Purification, Gornik explained. One of the oldest sections of Gringotts, created by goblin magicsmiths at the bank's founding. Other goblins were already present, wearing robes of deep burgundy with gold symbols embroidered along the hems. They nodded respectfully to Harry and Gornik. These are our ritual masters, Gornik said. They will assist in the cleansing. I must warn you again, Mr. Potter, this will be uncomfortable, possibly even painful. The Horcrux will resist removal. I understand, Harry said, though his heart was racing. Very well. Please remove your outer clothing and lie on the dais. You may keep your undergarments. Harry, feeling self-conscious but determined, removed Dudley's oversized pajamas and climbed onto the stone dais in just his underwear. The stone was cool against his back. Gornik and the other goblins took positions around the dais. Each raised a hand, palm outward toward Harry, and began to chant in that guttural language. The blue light from the crystals intensified, and Harry felt a strange pressure building in the air. The chanting grew louder, and the pressure increased until Harry felt as if he were deep underwater. Then, abruptly, the pressure centered on his forehead, directly over his scar. Pain blossomed, not the usual dull ache he was accustomed to, but a sharp, burning agony that made him gasp. The goblins' chanting reached a crescendo. Harry's scar felt as if it were being split open. He wanted to scream but found he couldn't move or make a sound. The pressure increased, the pain becoming unbearable. And then he heard it, a high, cold voice inside his head, I will not be cast out. The boy is mine. Terrifying images flashed through Harry's mind, a pale, snake-like face with glowing red eyes, a wand pointed at his mother as she begged for mercy, green light and screaming, no. Harry thought back fiercely. Get out of my head. You don't belong here. The pain intensified to a blinding white agony. Harry felt as if his skull were splitting open. The cold voice screamed in rage, and Harry screamed with it, finally breaking through whatever had been holding him silent. And then, with a sensation like a hook being torn from his flesh, something dark and oily was ripped from his scar. Harry saw it hovering above him, a smoky, writhing mass that seemed to have a face contorted in fury. The goblins' chanting changed, becoming sharper, more commanding, and the smoky mass was drawn toward a black crystalline container that one of the ritual masters held. When the last wisp of the dark substance had been captured, the container was sealed with a flash of white light. Harry collapsed back onto the dais, exhausted but feeling lighter than he could ever remember feeling. The pain in his scar, a constant companion for as long as he could recall, was gone. It is done, Gornik said, his voice rough with exertion. The soul fragment has been contained. It will be destroyed through goblin fire, which is one of the few substances capable of destroying a Horcrux. Harry tried to sit up but found he barely had the strength. Thank you, he whispered. Rest, Mr. Potter, Gornik said, his tone gentler than Harry had heard it before. The ritual has taken much of your strength, but you will recover quickly. The magical suppressions that were tied to the Horcrux have been broken. You may experience surges of accidental magic as your power stabilizes. Harry must have dozed off, because when he opened his eyes again, he was back in Gornik's office, lying on a comfortable couch. He was dressed in new clothes, not Dudley's hand-me-downs, but garments that actually fit, simple black trousers, a green shirt that Gornik mentioned matched his eyes, and a light robe over top. These are from your trust vault, Gornick explained when he noticed Harry examining the clothes. Your parents left provisions for your maintenance, including appropriate wizarding attire. How long was I asleep? Harry asked, sitting up. He felt remarkably well, better than he could ever remember feeling. Nearly 6 hours, Gornick said. It is now approaching evening. The ritual was more complex than anticipated, but ultimately successful. How do you feel? Different, Harry said after a moment's consideration. Lighter. And. He hesitated, trying to find the right words. Like there's more of me somehow. Like I was compressed into a smaller space before, and now I can stretch out. Gornick nodded as if this made perfect sense. Your magic was bound, Mr. Potter. Now it flows freely. You will need training to control it properly. But I'm supposed to go back to the Dursleys, aren't I? The thought filled Harry with dread. They hate magic. They punish me whenever anything strange happens. That is no longer necessary, Gornick said firmly. With your status as Potter heir now magically recognized, you have certain rights under wizarding law. We can file for magical guardianship reassignment on grounds of abuse and magical suppression. Until that process is complete, you could remain in one of your family properties under goblin wardship. I have houses? Harry asked, momentarily distracted. Several. The main Potter estate was damaged the night your parents died but has been repaired. There is also a cottage in Godric's Hollow, though that remains largely as it was after the attack, preserved as a historical site. And a townhouse in London that has been maintained by house elves. House elves. Magical servants bound to wizarding families. The Potters have 3, Tippy, Mipsy, and Ollie. They have continued to maintain the properties in anticipation of your eventual return. Harry's head was spinning with all this new information. Could I meet them? Gornick seemed surprised by the request but nodded. He rang the small bell on his desk, and a moment later, 3 small creatures appeared with soft popping sounds. They had large, bat-like ears, huge eyes, and wore what looked like pillowcases embroidered with the Potter crest. Upon seeing Harry, all 3 burst into tears and prostrated themselves on the floor. Master Harry has returned, wailed one, its voice high and squeaky. Tippy has waited so long. Mipsy kept the house clean for young master, sobbed another, pulling at its ears in apparent distress or joy, Harry couldn't tell which. Ollie knew Master Harry would come back to his elves, said the third, looking up at Harry with tennis ball-sized eyes swimming with tears. Heir. Harry wasn't sure how to respond. Hello. It's nice to meet you all. This triggered a fresh round of sobbing and declarations of loyalty. Gornick waited patiently until the elves had calmed somewhat before addressing them. Mr. Potter will need accommodation at the London townhouse, he said. Please prepare it for immediate occupancy. The elves disappeared with 3 more pops, still sniffling but looking ecstatic. They seem very emotional, Harry said. House elves form strong bonds with their wizarding families, Gornick explained. The Potter elves have been without a master to serve for nearly 6 years. Your return represents the restoration of their purpose. Harry wasn't entirely comfortable with the concept of having servants, but he was too overwhelmed by everything else to question it now. What happens next? He asked. We have much to discuss regarding your inheritance, the illegal placement with your Muggle relatives, and the educational options available to you before you attend Hogwarts at age 11, Gornick said. But perhaps these matters can wait until tomorrow. You have experienced a significant magical upheaval today and should rest. But the Dursleys, they'll notice I'm gone, Harry pointed out. I have taken the liberty of sending a magical substitute, a construct that will maintain your appearance at Privet Drive until we have secured legal arrangements for your guardianship. It cannot perform magic but will otherwise mimic your behavior patterns. Seeing Harry's surprise, Gornick added, Gringotts protects its clients' interests with all available means, Mr. Potter. Thank you, Harry said, genuinely moved by the goblin's efforts on his behalf. For everything. Gornik inclined his head. The Potter family has always treated the Goblin Nation with respect and fairness. We honor our alliances, even across generations. He stood. Now, I believe it is time for you to see your London home. Tomorrow, we will address the many questions you must have and begin planning for your future, a future that will now be determined by your choices rather than Albus Dumbledore's manipulations. Harry followed Gornik back to the main hall of Gringotts, his mind filled with the day's revelations. His parents hadn't died in a car crash. He was a wizard. He had homes and vaults and house elves. Dumbledore, whoever he was, had left a piece of Voldemort in his scar and bound his magic. And now, for the first time in his memory, Harry Potter was free. The London townhouse was nothing like number 4, Privet Drive. Located on a quiet square in a part of London Harry didn't recognize, it was 4 stories tall with gleaming windows and a glossy black door bearing a silver knocker in the shape of a stag's head. Inside, it was a curious mix of old-fashioned elegance and modern comfort. The floors were polished wood with thick rugs, the furniture looked antique but well-maintained, and there were moving photographs everywhere, wizarding portraits, Gornik explained, that captured not just an image but a shadow of the subject's personality. Harry was drawn to one particular photograph on the mantelpiece in the main sitting room. It showed a handsome man with untidy black hair, just like Harry's, with his arm around a beautiful woman with long red hair and startlingly green eyes, just like Harry's. They were laughing, occasionally looking down at the bundle in the woman's arms, a baby with a tuft of black hair. Your parents, Gornik said quietly. James and Lily Potter, with you, shortly after your birth. Harry stared at the photograph, drinking in every detail. He'd never seen a picture of his parents before. Aunt Petunia had refused to speak of her sister except to say that she and that awful Potter had gotten themselves killed through their freakishness. But here they were, young and vibrant and clearly in love with each other and with their baby son. Harry felt a lump in his throat. I'll leave you to settle in, Gornik said. The house elves will attend to your needs. I will return tomorrow morning to continue our discussions. He handed Harry a small silver device. This is a communication mirror. Simply say my name if you need to reach me before then. After the goblin had departed, Harry wandered through the house, exploring his inheritance. The house elves followed at a respectful distance, occasionally pointing out features or explaining the history of particular items. There was a library filled with books on magic, a formal dining room with a table that could seat 20, a conservatory with exotic magical plants, and several bedrooms, each more luxurious than anything Harry had ever seen. On the top floor, he found what must have been his parents' suite, a large bedroom with a sitting area and adjoining bathroom. And next to it, a nursery painted with a mural of magical creatures that moved across the walls. A crib stood in the center, with a mobile hanging above it, tiny golden snitches, which Tippy explained were from a game called Quidditch, that gently orbited on their own. This was being Master Harry's room when he was a baby, Tippy said, her huge eyes watching him carefully. Master James and Mistress Lily brought Master Harry here when they went into hiding from the bad wizard. They lived here before going to Godric's Hollow? Harry asked. Yes, young master. This was being the Potter London home for many generations. Harry felt a connection to his parents here stronger than he had ever experienced before. They had walked these floors, sat in these rooms, planned for a future with him that had been violently cut short. Tippy, he said suddenly, do you know why Dumbledore left me with the Dursleys instead of following my parents' will? Tippy wrung her hands, clearly distressed. Tippy does not know, Master Harry. When the bad night happened, and Master James and Mistress Lily died, Professor Dumbledore came and told the elves that Master Harry would be safe with his Muggle family. Tippy and Mipsy and Ollie wanted to go to Master Harry, but Professor Dumbledore said we must stay and keep the Potter homes ready. Her large eyes filled with tears. We is good elves. We did as we was told. But we missed Master Harry every day. It's not your fault, Harry said quickly, uncomfortable with the elf's distress. You couldn't have known I was sleeping in a cupboard. This was evidently the wrong thing to say. Tippy let out a wail of horror and began banging her head against the wall. Bad Tippy. Bad. Let Master Harry sleep in a cupboard. Stop. Harry cried, alarmed. Please stop hurting yourself. It wasn't your fault. Tippy froze mid-bang, looking at Harry with tear-filled eyes. Master Harry is too kind. But house elves is meant to care for their wizards. Tippy has failed. You didn't fail, Harry said firmly. Dumbledore didn't let you come to me. And anyway, I'm here now, aren't I? No more cupboards for me. This seemed to console the little elf somewhat. She straightened her pillowcase and wiped her eyes on a corner of it. What would Master Harry like for dinner? Tippy can make anything Master wishes. Realizing he was actually quite hungry after the day's events, Harry asked for whatever's easy, and followed the elf down to the kitchen, a cavernous room in the basement with a massive hearth, rows of copper pots hanging from the ceiling, and a long wooden table where, Tippy informed him, the Potter elves traditionally took their meals. While Tippy bustled around preparing what she called just a simple dinner, but which turned out to be a feast of roast chicken, potatoes, vegetables, fresh bread, and treacle tart, Harry sat at the kitchen table and tried to process everything that had happened. In the space of a day, his entire understanding of himself and his history had been upended. He was not an unwanted burden but the heir to a wealthy and respected wizarding family. His parents hadn't died in a car crash but had been murdered protecting him. He had been famous in the wizarding world all this time without knowing it. And someone, Albus Dumbledore, had deliberately kept him ignorant of all of this, had left a fragment of a dark wizard's soul in his head, and had bound his magic. Why? What possible reason could there be for such actions? These questions were still swirling in Harry's mind as he ate Tippy's delicious dinner. The food was better than anything he'd ever tasted, and for the first time in his life, he was encouraged to eat until he was full rather than having to make do with whatever scraps the Dursleys allowed him. After dinner, exhausted despite his earlier rest, Harry was shown to what Tippy called the young master's bedroom, a comfortable room with a four-poster bed, a window seat overlooking the square, and walls lined with bookshelves filled with both magical and Muggle children's books. Your mother added the Muggle books, Tippy explained. Mistress Lily said young wizards should know both worlds. Harry ran his fingers along the spines of books he'd never been allowed to read at the Dursleys. He selected one, a collection of fairy tales that, according to Mipsy, had been one of his mother's favorites to read to him as a baby, and climbed into the impossibly soft bed. As he opened the book, he noticed a small inscription on the inside cover, "To my darling Harry on his first birthday. May you always find wonder in stories, both magical and Muggle. All my love, Mum." Harry traced the elegant handwriting with his finger, a tangible connection to the mother he couldn't remember. For the first time, he had something that had been truly meant for him, a gift given with love rather than resentment. He fell asleep that night with the book open on his chest, surrounded by the remnants of his parents' love, free from the dark presence that had shadowed him his entire life, and filled with more hope than he had ever known. Morning came with sunlight streaming through curtains that Ollie opened with a snap of his fingers. Harry woke disoriented, and used to such a large, comfortable bed, before remembering the previous day's extraordinary events. Tippy had laid out clothes for him, more items from his trust vault, all in his size, and prepared a breakfast that would have fed the entire Dursley family twice over. Harry ate what he could, still unused to being allowed, even encouraged, to eat his fill. Gornick arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, carrying several folders and scrolls. He and Harry settled in the library, where a fire crackled despite the summer warmth outside. "I trust you slept well, Mr. Potter," the goblin inquired. "Yes, thank you," Harry replied. "Better than I ever have, I think." Unsurprising, given the removal of the parasitic soul fragment, Gornick said matter-of-factly. "Now, we have much to discuss. Where would you prefer to begin?" Harry had been thinking about this since waking. "With Dumbledore," he said decisively. "Why did he leave me with the Dursleys? Why did he leave that thing in my head? Gornik's expression darkened. Those questions are linked, I believe. Based on our analysis and what limited information we could gather overnight, it appears that Albus Dumbledore placed you with your Muggle relatives for two primary reasons. He raised one long finger. First, your mother's sacrifice created a blood protection that could be maintained through her sister, supposedly keeping you safe from Voldemort's followers. He raised a second finger. Second, and I believe more pertinently, keeping you ignorant of your heritage and isolated from the wizarding world ensured you would be more malleable when you eventually entered it. Malleable? Harry repeated, not sure he understood. Easily influenced, Gornik clarified. Think of it from Dumbledore's perspective. You are the boy who lived, the child who somehow defeated the darkest wizard in generations. You are a symbol of hope to many in the wizarding world. But you are also potentially very powerful in your own right, as evidenced by your survival and Voldemort's defeat. A child raised knowing his importance, with full access to his magical heritage and power, might develop his own ideas about his role in the world. But why would that matter to Dumbledore? Because, Mr. Potter, Albus Dumbledore has appointed himself the guardian of the wizarding world's fate. He orchestrates events from behind the scenes, positioning people like pieces on a chessboard. Gornik's voice carried a subtle note of contempt. The goblins have observed his machinations for decades. He is not evil, as Voldemort was evil, but he believes absolutely in his own judgment above all others. Harry frowned, trying to understand. And the Horcrux? Why leave that in me? That is more troubling, Gornik admitted. Our theory, and I stress that it is only a theory, is that Dumbledore recognized the Horcrux but saw it as potentially useful. Perhaps he believed it created a connection to Voldemort that might be exploited later. Or perhaps... The goblin hesitated. Perhaps he believed that the only way to truly destroy Voldemort would be to sacrifice you. Sacrifice me? Harry's voice rose in alarm. If Voldemort created multiple Horcruxes, as some evidence suggests, then all would need to be destroyed to eliminate him permanently. If you were one such Horcrux, and if Dumbledore believed Voldemort would return someday, he'd be planning for me to die, Harry finished, feeling sick. But that doesn't make sense. Why not just remove the Horcrux like you did? Perhaps he doesn't know how, Gornik suggested. Or perhaps he believed the connection might serve some greater purpose in the interim. Dumbledore plays a long game, Mr. Potter. His plans often span decades. Harry sat back, trying to absorb the implications. So what happens now? Will he know the Horcrux is gone? Eventually, yes. The monitoring devices he likely has tied to you will show changes in your magical signature. But we have time before he realizes what has occurred. Gornik opened one of his folders. Meanwhile, we have filed for emergency review of your guardianship with the Department of Magical Family Services. The evidence of neglect, combined with the unauthorized binding of your magic and the failure to remove dark magic from your person, should be sufficient to revoke Dumbledore's de facto guardianship. What does that mean for me? Where will I live? You have several options, Gornik said. The most straightforward would be to establish formal goblin guardianship until you reach magical majority at 17. This would allow you to live in one of your properties with house elf supervision and goblin oversight. Is that normal? For goblins to be guardians of wizards? Harry asked. No, Gornik admitted. But these are unusual circumstances. Alternatively, we could attempt to revisit your parents' original wishes. Sirius Black was imprisoned without trial in the aftermath of your parents' deaths. He was accused of betraying their location to Voldemort and of killing another friend, Peter Pettigrew, along with 12 Muggles. Without trial? Harry said, shocked. How is that possible? It was a chaotic time, Gornik said grimly. And Bartemius Crouch, who headed the Department of Magical Law Enforcement then, was not overly concerned with due process for suspected Death Eaters, Voldemort's followers. But if he was my parents' choice for guardian, shouldn't someone have made sure? Indeed they should have, Gornik agreed. Which raises questions about why Dumbledore, who was chief warlock of the Wizengamot even then, did not insist on a proper trial. Harry was beginning to develop a strong dislike for Albus Dumbledore. Can we do something about that? About Sirius Black? We are already exploring legal options, Gornik assured him. But these matters take time. For now, you need a safe place to stay and appropriate education in magic. I thought I couldn't go to Hogwarts until I'm 11. Hogwarts, no. But there's nothing preventing you from receiving private tutoring. The Potter vaults can easily cover the expense, and you need to learn to control your magic, which will likely be quite powerful now that the bindings have been removed. Harry liked this idea very much. Could I really learn magic now? Even though I'm only 7. Wizard children typically begin showing accidental magic around age 7, though some manifest earlier. Formal wand use is generally restricted until age 11, but there are many aspects of magic that don't require a wand: theory, history, potions, herbology, and the foundations of various magical disciplines. Gornik's expression became thoughtful. You might also benefit from some goblin teachings, which approach magic differently than wizards do. I'd like to learn everything, Harry said eagerly. Wizard magic, goblin magic, whatever else there is. Gornik's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. Your enthusiasm does you credit, Mr. Potter. We will arrange a suitable curriculum and tutors. He consulted another of his folders. Now, regarding your Muggle education, do I still need that? Harry interrupted, then immediately felt rude for doing so. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. No offense taken, Gornik said. And yes, you should continue your Muggle education. Your mother valued it, according to our records, and understanding the non-magical world is a valuable asset. We can arrange either private tutoring or enrollment in a suitable Muggle school, depending on your preference. Harry thought about this. He'd actually enjoyed school when Dudley wasn't interfering, and the idea of attending without his cousin's bullying was appealing. I think I'd like to go to school, if possible. A different one from Dudley's, obviously. That can be arranged. Gornik made a note. For the remainder of this summer, however, I suggest you focus on understanding your new circumstances and beginning your magical education. The fall term can be your introduction to a new Muggle school. They spent the rest of the morning discussing the details of Harry's inheritance, the investments his family had made over generations, the properties they owned beyond the 3 Gornik had mentioned initially, including shares in several businesses in both the Wizarding and Muggle worlds, and the various heirlooms and artifacts stored in the Potter vaults. Your trust vault, which you visited briefly yesterday, contains funds specifically for your education and maintenance until you come of age, Gornik explained. The main Potter vault, which you will have full access to at 17, contains the bulk of your inheritance. There is also a vault specifically for magical artifacts considered too valuable or powerful for general circulation. Like what? Harry asked curiously. Family grimoires containing spells developed by your ancestors, enchanted items of historical significance, and certain rare magical substances. Gornik consulted his notes. Including, interestingly, an invisibility cloak that has been in your family for generations. Most such cloaks lose their efficacy over time, but this one has remained perfectly functional for centuries, suggesting it may be more than an ordinary magical artifact. Harry's head was spinning with all this information. It was overwhelming to go from having nothing of his own to being the heir of such wealth and history. After lunch, which Tippy insisted on serving in the formal dining room despite it being just Harry and Gornik, they moved on to discussing Harry's immediate future. The magical construct at Privet Drive will maintain your appearance there for approximately 1 week, Gornik said. By then, we should have the initial guardianship hearing. Given the evidence, I expect the Department of Magical Family Services will grant at least temporary guardianship to Gringotts, with a full review to follow. Will I have to see the Dursleys again? Harry asked, hoping the answer was no. That will depend on the Ministry's decision, Gornik said carefully. But I think it unlikely you will be required to return to their care. Good, Harry said firmly. In the meantime, we should begin your introduction to the wizarding world. You have much to learn before you make your public reappearance. The boy who lived returning to Wizarding Society will cause quite a stir. I don't really like the sound of that, Harry admitted. I don't want to be famous for something I can't even remember. A wise attitude, Gornick approved. Nevertheless, your name carries weight in our world. Learning to navigate that reality will be an important part of your education. By the end of their meeting, a plan had been established. Harry would remain at the London townhouse under house elf care, with daily visits from Gornick or other goblin representatives. Tutors would be arranged for both magical and muggle subjects. Steps would be taken to legally formalize his guardianship situation and to investigate Sirius Black's imprisonment. Most importantly to Harry, he would begin learning about the world his parents had belonged to, the world he should have grown up in. As Gornick prepared to leave, Harry asked one final question that had been nagging at him. Will Dumbledore come looking for me once he realizes I'm not with the Dursleys anymore? Almost certainly, Gornick said grimly. But the wards on this property are ancient and powerful. They've been renewed and strengthened since your parents' deaths. Dumbledore will not find you easily, and he cannot legally remove you once the Ministry has formalized alternative guardianship arrangements. He fixed Harry with a steady gaze. Make no mistake, Mr. Potter, this situation will eventually lead to a confrontation with Albus Dumbledore. But when that time comes, you will be prepared. You will not face him as an ignorant child, but as the Potter heir, with the full weight of your family's legacy behind you. As the goblin departed, Harry wandered back to the library, drawn to the bookshelves filled with his family's collection. He selected a volume titled, An Introduction to Magical Theory for Young Wizards, and settled into a comfortable armchair by the window. Outside, London continued its ordinary hustle and bustle, oblivious to the magical world hidden within it. Oblivious to the fact that in a townhouse invisible to Muggle eyes, a 7-year-old boy with a lightning-shaped scar was beginning a journey that would change the course of wizarding history. Harry Potter turned the page, free from the darkness that had been planted within him, ready to discover who he truly was and who he might become. Chapter 2, Shadows and Light. Morning light filtered through heavy velvet curtains as Harry awoke in his four-poster bed. For a moment, disorientation gripped him. This spacious bedroom was nothing like his cupboard at Privet Drive. Then the memories of the previous day flooded back, Gringotts, the goblins, the Horcrux removal, learning about his parents and heritage. He was free. Harry stretched luxuriously, still marveling at the softness of the sheets and the simple joy of having space to move. He'd slept deeply, with no nightmares for the first time in memory. The constant pressure behind his scar, so familiar he'd never questioned it, was gone. A soft pop announced Tippy's arrival. The house elf beamed at him, her large eyes filled with adoration. Good morning, Master Harry. Tippy has brought breakfast and laid out clothes. She gestured to a tray laden with food and a neat stack of garments. Thank you, Tippy, Harry said, still adjusting to being served rather than serving. But you don't have to call me Master. Just Harry is fine. The elf's ears drooped in distress. Oh, but Tippy must. It would be most improper to address the Potter heir so casually. Harry sighed, recognizing a losing battle. All right, but maybe just Master Harry instead of Master all the time. This compromise brightened Tippy considerably. Yes, Master Harry. Tippy can do that. She bowed low. Master Gornick will arrive at 9 o'clock. He says your education begins today. After Tippy departed, Harry devoured his breakfast, eggs, bacon, toast with marmalade, and fresh orange juice, while gazing out the window at the London square below. Muggles hurried past, completely unaware of the magical townhouse in their midst. According to Gornick, the building was protected by notice-me-not charms and other enchantments that made it invisible to non-magical eyes. Harry dressed in his new clothes, comfortable dark trousers, a green button-down shirt, and a light open robe that Gornik had explained was casual wizarding attire. Everything fit perfectly, a novel experience after years in Dudley's enormous cast-offs. Precisely at 9, the doorbell chimed. Harry hurried downstairs to find Gornik in the entrance hall, accompanied by a tall, lean goblin with silver-streaked hair tied back in a severe knot. "Good morning, Mr. Potter," Gornik said with a slight bow. "May I present Mistress Nagnok, who will oversee the academic portion of your education." The female goblin, at least Harry assumed she was female from the title, assessed him with sharp amber eyes. "The Potter heir," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic for a goblin. "I knew your father. An exceptional wizard in transfiguration, though lamentably unfocused in his youth." Her gaze flicked to Harry's scar. "And your mother was brilliant with charms and potions. We shall see what talents you possess." "It's nice to meet you," Harry said, unsure of proper etiquette but determined to be polite. Nagnok's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Polite, at least. That's something." She turned to Gornik. "I'll begin with assessment. Send the others at the appointed times." "Others?" Harry asked as Gornik departed with a nod. "Did you think I would be your only instructor?" Nagnok led the way to the library. "Magic is vast, Mr. Potter, encompassing many disciplines. I will oversee your general magical education and teach you goblin approaches to magic, which differ significantly from wizarding methods. Others will instruct you in specific subjects." The library had been transformed overnight. The comfortable seating remained, but a large oak table now dominated the center of the room, covered with books, parchments, and curious instruments Harry couldn't identify. "Sit," Nagnok commanded, gesturing to a chair at the table. "Before we begin formal instruction, I must understand what we're working with. The removal of the Horcrux and the magical bindings will have altered your magical signature significantly." Harry sat obediently. "What's a magical signature?" "Every witch and wizard has a unique magical pattern, like a fingerprint," Nagnok explained, selecting a crystal sphere from the table. "Detecting and understanding your own signature is fundamental to controlling your magic." She placed the crystal in Harry's hands. It was heavier than it looked, cool to the touch. "Close your eyes. Feel your magic. It flows through your body like blood, but follows different channels." Harry closed his eyes, feeling slightly foolish. How was he supposed to feel something he didn't understand? But as he concentrated, focusing inward as Nagnok instructed, he became aware of a warm current flowing beneath his skin. It pulsed with his heartbeat but followed its own rhythm, converging in his chest before branching outward to his limbs. "I feel something," he said quietly. "Like warm water flowing through me." "Good. Direct it toward the crystal. Will it to fill the space you're holding." Harry tried, imagining the warm current flowing down his arms into his hands. For several moments, nothing happened. Then the crystal grew warm against his palms, and behind his closed eyelids, he saw a soft green glow. "Open your eyes," Nagnok said, her voice betraying a hint of surprise. The crystal glowed emerald green, pulsing gently with the same rhythm Harry had felt inside himself. Tiny motes of gold light swirled within its depths. "Interesting," Nagnok murmured. "Strong earth affinity with fire aspects. Similar to your father's signature, though his fire element was dominant. The gold indicates unusual potential for healing magic, that would be your mother's influence." "What does it mean to have an earth affinity?" Harry asked, fascinated by the glowing crystal. "Elemental affinities shape how your magic manifests," Nagnok explained. "Earth magic is associated with stability, growth, protection. Those with strong earth affinities often excel at transfiguration, herbology, and certain types of defensive magic." She gestured at the crystal. "The fire aspect suggests passion, creativity, and potentially formidable offensive capabilities when properly channeled." The crystal's glow began to fade as Harry's concentration wavered. Nagnok took it from his hands and placed it back on the table. We have much to work with, she said, nodding with satisfaction. Your magical core is unusually developed for a 7-year-old, likely due to it compensating for the bindings that were placed on you. Now that those restrictions are removed, you'll need to learn control quickly. Is that bad? Harry asked, suddenly worried. Having too much magic? Not bad, but potentially problematic without proper training. Accidental magic occurs when emotion overpowers conscious control. With your enhanced core, such incidents could be more dramatic than typical childhood outbursts. Nagnok fixed him with a stern gaze. Which is why discipline will be the foundation of your education. What followed was the most intensive morning of Harry's young life. Nagnok began with magical theory, explaining fundamental principles that governed all magic regardless of its application. Harry learned about magical cores, the development of magical channels, and the basic laws of magical conservation. Magic cannot be created or destroyed, Nagnok told him, only transformed. Every spell draws energy from your core and converts it according to your intent. The stronger your intent and understanding, the more efficient the conversion. Unlike his Muggle schooling, where Harry had deliberately held back to avoid outshining Dudley, he threw himself into this education with enthusiasm. Nagnok was strict but fair, demanding focus but explaining concepts clearly and answering his many questions with patience. By lunchtime, Harry's head was swimming with new information. He'd filled several pages of parchment with notes, practiced visualizing his magical core, and begun the first exercises in magical meditation. You've done well, Nagnok said as Tippy appeared with a lunch tray. We'll continue this afternoon with practical applications. The theory is meaningless without implementation. While they ate, a delicious soup with fresh bread and cheese, Harry asked the question that had been nagging at him all morning. Mistress Nagnok, why are you helping me? I mean, I'm grateful, but Gornik said it's unusual for goblins to teach wizards. Nagnok considered him with those sharp amber eyes. Several reasons, Mr. Potter. First, the Goblin Nation honors its alliances. Your family has treated us with respect for generations, a rarity among wizard kind. She set down her spoon. Second, what was done to you, placing a Horcrux in a child and binding their magic, violates principles that transcend the divisions between our peoples. It was wrong. Her expression darkened. And third, Albus Dumbledore has interfered in goblin affairs once too often. His vision for the wizarding world leaves little place for beings he considers lesser. The opportunity to thwart his plans for you is satisfying. You really don't like him, Harry observed. He presents himself as a champion of equality while maintaining the very power structures that ensure inequality, Nagnok said bitterly. His pretty words about cooperation mean little when he supports legislation that restricts goblin rights and autonomy. Harry nodded, filing this information away. It aligned with what Gornik had suggested about Dumbledore's tendency to manipulate from behind the scenes while presenting a benevolent facade. After lunch, as promised, they moved to practical exercises. In a cleared space at the center of the library, Nagnok taught Harry basic wandless magic, not formal spells, but how to channel his magic intentionally. Wizard children are taught to rely on wands almost exclusively, she explained. But wands are focusing tools, not sources of magic. The magic comes from within you. Goblins and many magical beings use different methods of focus. She demonstrated by extending her long-fingered hand toward a quill on the table. The quill rose smoothly into the air, hovering at eye level. I'm directing my magic through focal points in my body, primarily my hands, which have been trained as magical conduits. She lowered the quill gently back to the table. You can do the same, though it requires more concentration than using a wand. Harry extended his hand as she had done, focusing on the quill and trying to channel the warm current he'd felt earlier. Nothing happened. You're trying too hard, Nagnok observed. Magic responds to intent and visualization more than physical effort. Close your eyes. Feel your magic. Now imagine it extending beyond your fingertips, like an invisible hand reaching for the quill. Harry tried again, visualizing as instructed. This time, he felt a tingle in his fingers, a sense of his magic stretching outward. When he opened his eyes, the quill trembled slightly but remained on the table. Again, Nagnok instructed. Magic, like any skill, improves with practice. By the end of the afternoon, Harry had managed to levitate the quill a few inches above the table for several seconds. The achievement, though modest, filled him with elation. He was doing magic, real, intentional magic. A promising start, Nagnok said as they concluded the day's lessons. Practice the meditation exercises tonight before sleep. Tomorrow we'll continue with basic magical theory and begin your introduction to wizarding culture and history. After Nagnok departed, Harry wandered through the townhouse, still processing everything he'd learned. He ended up in the sitting room, drawn again to the photographs of his parents. Looking at their smiling faces, he felt a curious mix of joy and sorrow, joy at finally knowing them, at least a little, and sorrow for the years they should have had together. Master Harry? Ollie appeared with a soft pop. Master Gornek is sending a message. The construct at the Muggle house is functioning as expected. The Muggles is not suspecting anything. Thank you, Ollie, Harry said, momentarily startled by the reminder of his other life, the false Harry still living with the Dursleys. It felt increasingly distant, like a bad dream he was waking from. Does Master Harry need anything else? Dinner will be ready in 1 hour. Harry was about to say no when a thought struck him. Actually, Ollie, I was wondering, did you know my parents well? What were they like? Ollie's large eyes welled with tears, but his expression was joyful. Oh yes, Master Harry. Ollie knew Master James since he was being a small boy himself. Master James was being kind to house elves, always thanking us and asking about our well-being, most unusual for a young wizard. The elf twisted his pillowcase absently. Master James was being very mischievous as a boy, always playing pranks and getting into trouble. But he grew into a great wizard, powerful and brave. Harry smiled, hungry for these details about his father. And my mother? Mistress Lily was the kindest which Ollie ever served, the elf said reverently. When she first came to Potter House after marrying Master James, she learned all the house elves' names and our favorite things. She made us special treats on our birthdays. Ollie's voice dropped to an odd whisper. She even asked if we wanted payment or clothes. From Gornik's explanation of house elf customs, Harry understood this was extraordinary. What did you say? We was being horrified, of course. Ollie exclaimed. But Mistress Lily explained she only wanted us to be happy. When we told her serving the noble house of Potter was making us happy, she accepted our wishes. The elf smiled fondly. She was being a fierce protector of those she loved. When Master Harry was born, Mistress Lily told the elves that anyone who wished to harm her baby would have to get through her first. And in the end, Harry thought soberly, Voldemort had done exactly that. His mother had stood between him and death, sacrificing herself in a final act of protection. Thank you for telling me about them, Ollie, Harry said quietly. Master Harry is being very welcome, Ollie replied, his eyes still misty. We elves is keeping many memories of your parents. We is always happy to share them with you. After dinner, Harry practiced the meditation exercises Nagnok had taught him, sitting cross-legged on his bed with his eyes closed, focusing on the flow of magic within him. The more he practiced, the more distinct the sensation became, not just a vague warmth, but specific currents following pathways through his body. He fell asleep that night with his mind full of magical theory and memories of parents he was just beginning to know. The next week passed in a blur of intense education. Each morning began with Nagnok and magical theory, followed by practical exercises in basic wandless magic. Harry's abilities grew daily. By the end of the week, he could reliably levitate small objects, summon items across short distances, and produce a soft light from his palm, all without a wand. You have a natural aptitude for magic, Nagnock told him after he successfully illuminated the library when she extinguished all the lamps. Though that's hardly surprising given your parentage. Afternoons brought different instructors. A wizard named Reginald Thornwick, elderly but sharp-minded, taught him wizarding culture, history, and politics. Thornwick had been a solicitor for several old wizarding families and knew the intricacies of pure-blood society inside out. The wizarding world operates on traditions that may seem archaic to someone raised in the Muggle world, Thornwick explained in his first lesson. Family connections, blood status, and alliance obligations still carry tremendous weight, particularly among the older families that dominate our government. Like the Potters? Harry asked. Indeed. The Potters are one of the Sacred 28, the oldest pure-blood families in Britain, though your family has long been considered blood traitors by certain factions for their progressive views and your father's marriage to a Muggle-born witch. Thornwick's expression suggested he found such distinctions ridiculous. Nevertheless, the Potter name commands respect across most of wizarding society. You'll need to understand the political landscape you're stepping into. Harry learned about the Ministry of Magic with its various departments, the Wizengamot that served as both court and legislative body, and the complex web of alliances and rivalries that influenced wizarding politics. Thornwick didn't shy away from the darker aspects, the prejudice against Muggle-borns and magical beings, the corruption that permeated parts of the government, and the lingering influence of Voldemort's ideology even years after his downfall. Many who supported who claimed to be under the Imperius curse after his defeat, Thornwick explained, referring to a spell that could control its victims. Some genuinely were. Others used wealth and connections to avoid punishment. Several now hold positions of power in the ministry. That doesn't seem fair, Harry said, frowning. Fairness is often sacrificed on the altar of expedience, Mr. Potter. Remember that when navigating wizarding politics. Other instructors came and went. A soft-spoken witch named Madame Blackwood taught him potions basics in the townhouse's well-equipped brewing room. A gruff, one-eyed wizard called simply Fletcher gave him lessons in spotting deception and avoiding manipulation. Constant vigilance. Fletcher barked at least once every session. Half the wizarding world will want to use you for your fame, and the other half for your fortune. Learn to see beneath the surface, Potter. Through it all, Harry absorbed knowledge like a sponge, reveling in the freedom to learn without restraint. The contrast with his life at the Dursleys couldn't have been more stark. There, he'd been punished for showing intelligence. Here, his quick understanding and eager questions were encouraged and rewarded. On the 7th day after his arrival at Gringotts, Gornick brought important news. The Department of Magical Family Services has granted an emergency hearing regarding your guardianship, the Goblin announced over breakfast. It's scheduled for tomorrow. If successful, it will formalize temporary Goblin guardianship while a full investigation into your placement with the Muggles proceeds. Will I need to be there? Harry asked nervously. Yes, though we've taken precautions to keep your appearance confidential. The hearing will be closed, with only essential personnel present. Gornick hesitated. I should warn you, Dumbledore will likely be there. As your magical guardian of record, he must be notified of proceedings affecting your status. Harry's stomach tightened. So I'll meet him. Yes. But you'll be prepared. Fletcher will brief you on what to expect and how to handle questioning. Gornick's expression was grim. Dumbledore is persuasive and skilled at presenting his actions in the best possible light. Remember that his goals may not align with your best interests, no matter how benevolently he frames them. That afternoon, Fletcher put Harry through rigorous preparation for the hearing. They practiced answers to likely questions, reviewed the evidence of Harry's mistreatment at the Dursleys, and discussed strategies for responding to Dumbledore's potential arguments. He'll try to convince you that everything he did was for your protection, Fletcher growled. Don't get drawn into debating his intentions. Focus on the facts. You were neglected, your magic was bound, and dark magic was left inside you. Intentions don't erase consequences. By evening, Harry felt reasonably prepared but increasingly anxious. Sensing his unease, Tippy brought him hot chocolate and sat with him in the kitchen while he drank it. "Master Harry will do well tomorrow," she said confidently. "Master Harry is brave like his father and smart like his mother." "I'm scared of meeting Dumbledore," Harry admitted. "Everyone talks about how powerful and respected he is." "Even powerful wizards can make mistakes," Tippy said wisely. "And the greatest mistake is thinking they cannot make them." She patted his hand with her small one. "Master Harry has goblin magic protecting him now, and house elf magic too. Professor Dumbledore is not being the only powerful wizard in the world." Her confidence bolstered his spirits. That night, Harry practiced his meditation exercises with extra diligence, focusing on strengthening his magical control. If he had to face Albus Dumbledore tomorrow, he wanted to do so from a position of strength, not vulnerability. The next morning dawned grey and rainy, matching Harry's nervous mood. He dressed in formal wizarding attire Gornik had provided, dark blue robes over a white shirt and charcoal trousers, with the Potter heir ring prominently displayed on his right hand. His hair, perpetually unruly, resisted Tippy's best efforts to tame it. "Just like Master James," she said, finally giving up with a fond smile. Gornik arrived at 8 o'clock, accompanied by a stern-faced witch introduced as Madame Greengrass, a solicitor specializing in magical family law who would be representing Harry's interests at the hearing. "The evidence is compelling," she told Harry as they prepared to depart. "Medical examinations by goblin healers have documented the magical binding and the damage from the soul fragment. We have memories from the house elves showing the conditions of your relatives' home and their interactions with you. And your own testimony will be crucial." They traveled to the Ministry of Magic via a private fluke connection in the townhouse. The sensation was even more disorienting than the port key, spinning through green flames until Harry stumbled out into an ornate fireplace in what Gornik murmured was a private entrance, to avoid the public atrium. The room they emerged into was small but elegant, with dark paneled walls and a polished floor. Two wizards in official-looking robes waited to escort them through a maze of corridors that Harry suspected were deliberately circuitous to prevent him from being seen. They arrived at a heavy wooden door guarded by a serious-looking witch who checked their identities before allowing them entry. Inside was a small courtroom with a raised dais where 3 witches and wizards sat behind a long table. A few rows of chairs faced the dais, most empty, though Harry immediately noticed an elderly wizard with a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles seated in the front row. Albus Dumbledore. Even without knowing his identity, Harry would have found the man impossible to miss. He radiated a quiet authority, and when he turned to look at Harry, his bright blue eyes seemed to pierce right through him. Harry felt a slight pressure in his head, similar to when Nagnok tested his occlumency shields, and quickly implemented the mental defense technique she'd taught him, visualizing his thoughts behind a solid wall. The pressure ceased instantly, and something like surprise flickered across Dumbledore's face. Mr. Potter, the central figure on the dais, spoke, a square-jawed witch with short grey hair and a monocle. "I am Madame Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Given the sensitive nature of this case, I've been asked to preside. These are my colleagues, Mr. Gareth Pickering from the Department of Magical Family Services and Madame Augusta Longbottom, sitting as Wisengamot representative." Harry's attention caught on the last name, Longbottom. Gornik had mentioned Alice Longbottom as his parents' alternative choice for guardian. "We are here to determine whether emergency action is warranted regarding your guardianship," Madame Bones continued. "This is not a criminal proceeding, but an evaluation of your current placement and potential alternatives. Do you understand?" "Yes, Madame Bones," Harry replied, as coached. "Very well. Albus, as Mr. Potter's magical guardian of record, you may speak first." Dumbledore rose gracefully. Up close, Harry could see that the headmaster wore midnight blue robes embroidered with silver stars that seemed to twinkle in the light. His manner was grandfatherly and kind, but Harry reminded himself of everything he'd learned in the past week. "Thank you, Amelia," Dumbledore said, his voice gentle yet carrying easily through the room. I confess to some confusion regarding these proceedings. Young Harry was placed with his mother's sister and her husband for his own protection. Blood wards constructed from Lily Potter's sacrifice provide a shield against those who might wish him harm. While I understand there may be tensions in the household, surely removing him from that protection poses greater risks than allowing him to remain. Madame Greengrass stood. If I may, Madame Bones. The tensions Professor Dumbledore refers to constitute serious neglect bordering on abuse. Mr. Potter was confined to a cupboard under the stairs for sleeping quarters, systematically deprived of adequate nutrition, clothing, and basic care. Moreover, his magic was bound by spells bearing Albus Dumbledore's magical signature, and a fragment of dark magic was left untreated in his cursed scar for 6 years. Murmurs of shock came from the panel. Madame Longbottom in particular looked appalled, her formidable features set in outrage. These are serious allegations, Madame Bones said, turning to Dumbledore with a sharp gaze. What say you to them, Albus? For a fleeting moment, Harry thought he saw calculation behind the twinkling blue eyes. Then Dumbledore sighed heavily, his expression one of sorrowful regret. I placed monitoring charms on Privet Drive, of course, but they were designed to alert me to magical threats, not to observe the family's day-to-day treatment of Harry. If conditions were as described, I deeply regret my failure to ensure his proper care. He turned to Harry directly. I am truly sorry, my boy, if you have suffered. That was never my intention. The apology sounded sincere, but Harry remembered Fletcher's warning about Dumbledore's persuasiveness. He remained silent, waiting for the headmaster to address the more damning allegations. As for the binding of his magic, Dumbledore continued, that was a necessary precaution. Harry's magical core was unstable after the events of that Halloween night. The bindings were meant to allow his core to develop naturally without dangerous surges. And the dark magic in his scar? Madame Greengrass pressed. The soul fragment of you-know-who that goblin healers have now removed. At this, even Dumbledore couldn't entirely hide his shock, though he recovered quickly. I was aware of an unusual connection between Harry and Voldemort through the scar, yes. I had been researching methods to safely address it without harming the boy. If the goblins have indeed found a solution, that is cause for celebration, not censure. You left a piece of you-know-who inside a child for 6 years while you researched. Madame Longbottom's voice cracked like a whip. A fragment that was actively influencing him and draining his magic. That is unconscionable, Albus. I assure you, Augusta, I was monitoring the situation closely, not closely enough to notice he was sleeping in a cupboard, Madame Bones interrupted coldly. She turned to Harry. Mr. Potter, we would like to hear from you directly. What was your life like with your aunt and uncle? Harry took a deep breath. Fletcher had prepared him for this, emphasizing that he should stick to facts without embellishment. I lived with the Dursleys since I was a baby. My bedroom was the cupboard under the stairs until last week. I was given Dudley's, my cousins, old clothes and told to be grateful for them. I did most of the cooking from age 5 and all of the gardening and many household chores. If anything strange happened around me, what I now know was accidental magic, I was punished, usually by being locked in my cupboard without meals. He kept his voice steady, recounting the facts of his upbringing without self-pity. When he finished, the room was silent. And how did you come to leave the Dursley household? Mr. Pickering asked. I received a letter from Gringotts, Harry explained. It said there were irregularities with my accounts and asked me to come to the bank. When I got there, the goblins did tests that showed the bindings on my magic and the Horcrux in my scar. Horcrux. Madame Bones repeated sharply, her monocle nearly falling from her eye. Are you saying you know who created a Horcrux? Madame Greengrass interjected smoothly. The nature of the soul fragment is still being analyzed, Madame Bones. What matters for today's proceeding is that dark magic was allowed to remain in a child under Albus Dumbledore's guardianship when means existed to remove it safely. Dumbledore had gone very still during this exchange. Harry, He said quietly, "I hope you understand that everything I've done, every decision I've made regarding your care, has been with your ultimate safety in mind. The wizarding world is not always the haven we wish it to be. There are those who would use you, harm you, or exploit you for their own purposes. Like you did." The words escaped before Harry could stop them. He saw Gornick wince slightly, but Harry continued, emboldened by the headmaster's momentary speechlessness. "You left me with people who hated magic, who told me my parents died in a car crash, who treated me like a servant. You bound my magic and left Voldemort's soul in my head. If that's your idea of keeping me safe, I think I'd rather take my chances with someone else." Dumbledore looked genuinely pained. "Harry, there is much you don't understand, prophecies and greater contexts that shaped my decisions." "Prophecies?" Madame Longbottom interrupted sharply. "What prophecies, Albus?" The headmaster hesitated, clearly having said more than he intended. "That is a matter for another time, in a more secure setting." "I disagree," Madame Bones said firmly. "If a prophecy influenced your decisions regarding Mr. Potter's placement and care, it is directly relevant to these proceedings." Backed into a corner, Dumbledore sighed deeply. "Very well. Shortly before Harry's birth, a prophecy was made concerning a child who would have the power to defeat Lord Voldemort. The prophecy could have referred to one of two children born at the end of July 1980, Harry Potter or Neville Longbottom." Madame Longbottom gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "Voldemort learned of the prophecy's existence, though not its full contents," Dumbledore continued. "He chose to target Harry, thereby marking him as his equal, as the prophecy foretold." "And you believe this justified leaving him in an abusive household?" Madame Greengrass asked incredulously. "Binding his magic? Leaving dark magic in him?" "I believed, and still believe, that Harry's best protection lay in the blood wards created by his mother's sacrifice," Dumbledore said firmly. "As for the other measures, they were intended to protect him and others until he was ready to face his destiny." "His destiny?" Madame Bones repeated. "He's a 7-year-old boy, Albus, not a weapon to be forged for some future battle." The debate continued for another hour, with Madame Greengrass presenting goblin healer reports, memories extracted from Harry and viewed in a pensieve, and documentation of the Potter wills that had been improperly set aside. Throughout it all, Harry watched Dumbledore carefully, noting how the headmaster never directly denied any allegation but instead reframed his actions as necessary sacrifices for a greater good. Finally, Madame Bones called for a recess to deliberate. Harry, Gornick, and Madame Greengrass waited in a small antechamber, while Dumbledore remained in the courtroom, engaged in quiet conversation with several ministry officials who had observed the proceedings. "You did well," Gornick told Harry quietly. "Particularly in resisting the legilimency attempt. That pressure in my head, that was him trying to read my mind?" Harry asked, shocked despite the warnings he'd received. "Indeed. A subtle probe, but a violation nonetheless. The fact that you detected and blocked it speaks to your growing magical awareness." 20 minutes later, they were called back into the courtroom. The panel's expressions were grave as they retook their seats. Having reviewed the evidence, Madame Bones announced, "This panel finds that Mr. Potter's placement with the Dursley family was inappropriate and harmful to his well-being. The binding of his magic and failure to address the dark magical residue in his scar constitute serious breaches of guardianship duty." She fixed Dumbledore with a steely gaze. "Albus, while your intentions may have been protective, your methods were deeply flawed and potentially damaging to the child in your care." Dumbledore bowed his head, accepting the rebuke with apparent humility. "Regarding alternative guardianship," Madame Bones continued, "we find the Potter wills were improperly set aside without full Wisengamot review. As the primary designated guardian, Sirius Black, remains incarcerated, and the secondary guardian, Alice Longbottom, is medically incapacitated, we must consider other options." She turned to Harry. "Mr. Potter, the goblins of Gringotts have petitioned for temporary guardianship under an obscure but valid provision of magical treaty law. This would be an unusual arrangement, but given the circumstances, the panel is inclined to grant it on a provisional basis, pending a full review in 6 months' time. Do you have any objection to this arrangement? No, Madam Bones, Harry said clearly. The goblins have shown me more care in 1 week than the Dursleys did in 6 years. I trust them. Dumbledore rose. Amelia, I must object. While I acknowledge mistakes were made in Harry's Muggle placement, transferring guardianship to the Goblin Nation creates unprecedented legal complications and potential security concerns. Surely there are wizarding families who would, like the family that was designated in his parents' will. Madame Longbottom interrupted tartly. The godfather who was imprisoned without trial. The circumstances surrounding Sirius Black's arrest were chaotic, Dumbledore began. Yet as Chief Warlock, you had the authority to insist on proper judicial procedure, Madame Bones noted. Which you did not exercise. The evidence against Black was overwhelming, then a trial would have confirmed his guilt, Madame Longbottom snapped. I find it disturbing, Albus, that you were so quick to set aside James and Lily Potter's express wishes for their son's care. Dumbledore's expression remained composed, but Harry thought he detected frustration behind the calm facade. I acted as I believed necessary for Harry's protection. The Blood Wards have demonstrably failed to protect him from neglect and abuse, Madame Bones finished for him. No, Albus. Your objection is noted but overruled. This panel grants temporary magical guardianship to the Gringotts Guardianship Council, with the provision that Mr. Potter continue to receive appropriate wizarding and Muggle education. She looked directly at Harry. Mr. Potter, you will not be required to return to your relative's home. Your new guardians will arrange suitable accommodation and education. This panel will reconvene in 6 months to evaluate the arrangement and consider permanent guardianship solutions. With a tap of her wand on the table, Madame Bones concluded the hearing. Dumbledore approached Harry as they prepared to leave, his expression gentle but his eyes sharp. Harry, I hope you'll believe that I never intended you harm, he said quietly. There are forces at work beyond what has been discussed today, dangers you cannot yet comprehend. I only ask that you be cautious in whom you trust. Harry met the headmaster's gaze steadily. I am being cautious, Professor Dumbledore. That's why I'm leaving with the goblins. Something like sadness passed across Dumbledore's face. We will speak again, Harry. There is much I need to explain when you're ready to hear it. As they left the courtroom, Harry felt both relieved and unsettled. He had won his freedom from the Dursleys and from Dumbledore's direct control, but the headmaster's words about dangers and prophecies lingered in his mind. What did he mean about forces at work and dangers? He asked Gornick as they returned to the private Floo connection. Dumbledore believes Voldemort will return, the goblin replied grimly. And based on the Horcrux we removed from you, he may well be right. A wizard who creates even one such abomination has gone to extraordinary lengths to avoid true death. So Voldemort isn't really gone. The prospect sent a chill through Harry. Not gone, but severely weakened. Without a body, he exists as less than a spirit, a parasite that must possess other beings to interact with the world. Gornick's expression was serious. Dumbledore likely intended to use the connection through your scar to track Voldemort's movements or perhaps even to draw him out at a time of Dumbledore's choosing. Using me as bait, Harry said flatly. Or as a weapon, Gornick agreed. The prophecy he mentioned suggests you have some unique power against the Dark Lord. Dumbledore may have been grooming you to fulfill that prophecy according to his interpretation of it. The implications were staggering. Harry had gone from believing himself an unwanted orphan to learning he was at the center of a magical conflict that apparently hadn't ended with Voldemort's defeat 6 years ago. Upon returning to the London townhouse, Harry found the house elves had prepared a small celebration for the successful hearing. The dining room was decorated with green and gold streamers, and Tippy had baked a cake frosted with the words, "Congratulations Master Harry," in wobbly letters. Despite his unsettled thoughts about Dumbledore and prophecies, Harry was touched by their efforts. This was the first time anyone had celebrated any achievement of his, however small. Thank you, he told the beaming elves. This is brilliant. That evening, after the celebration, Harry sat in the library with Gornik, discussing what would change now that the Goblin guardianship was official. The construct at Privet Drive has been recalled, Gornik explained. As far as your relatives are concerned, you vanished in the night. The Ministry has dispatched obliviators to modify their memories regarding your disappearance. They'll recall sending you to a boarding school for troubled boys. They'll be happy about that, Harry said with a wry smile. They always wanted to be rid of me. Regarding your education, we'll continue as planned but can now expand the curriculum without concern for discovery. You'll begin formal studies in wandless magic, basic potions, herbology, and magical theory, along with appropriate Muggle subjects. What about a wand? Harry asked eagerly. Now that I'm officially a wizard in training, can I get one? Gornik hesitated. Traditionally, wizarding children receive wands at age 11 when they begin formal schooling. However, he tapped his long fingers thoughtfully on the arm of his chair. There are alternatives we might explore. Goblin-crafted focuses differ from wizard wands but can channel magic effectively. And certain wand makers in other countries have less restrictive age policies. So I might be able to get something like a wand before I'm 11. Possibly. I'll make inquiries. Gornik fixed Harry with a serious gaze. But remember that magical education is about more than spellcasting. Understanding the theory, history, and ethical dimensions of magic is equally important. Harry nodded, properly chastened but still excited by the possibilities. What about what Dumbledore said, about Voldemort possibly returning? And the prophecy? We are investigating both matters, Gornik assured him. The Goblin Nation has resources for tracking dark magic. As for the prophecy, all official prophecies are recorded in the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry. We're exploring legal means to access the record, as it directly concerns you. The conversation was interrupted by Tippy's appearance. Master Harry, there is being a visitor at the door. A most unusual visitor. Who is it? Harry asked, immediately wary after the confrontation with Dumbledore. It is being a. Tippy seemed at a loss for words. A very large doggy, Master Harry. With a letter in its mouth. The wards is allowing it through, which means it is not being dangerous to the Potter heir. Harry and Gornik exchanged puzzled looks before hurrying to the entrance hall. There, sitting patiently on the marble floor, was the largest black dog Harry had ever seen. It looked like a cross between a wolfhound and a bear, with shaggy fur and intelligent gray eyes. As promised, it held an envelope in its mouth. When it saw Harry, the dog's tail began to thump against the floor. It made no aggressive moves, simply watching him with those strangely human-like eyes. The house wards would not admit any being intending harm to you, Gornik said cautiously. But this is most unusual. Harry, acting on instinct, stepped forward and slowly extended his hand. Hello there. Do you have something for me? The dog carefully deposited the envelope at Harry's feet, then sat back, still watching him intently. The envelope was slightly damp from the dog's mouth but otherwise intact. Harry picked it up and saw his name written on the front in an untidy scrawl. Opening it, he found a brief note, Prongslet, if you're reading this, the rumors are true, you've escaped both the Muggles and the old man's plans. I've been watching from a distance, unable to approach until now. I am Padfoot, friend to Prongs and Lilyflower. Falsely accused, I broke free when I heard whispers of your changed circumstances. We have much to discuss, but public correspondence is risky. If you trust me enough to let me in, I can explain everything. If not, I'll understand and retreat to the shadows until you're ready. Either way, beware the manipulator with twinkling eyes. Not all his plans serve the light, even if he believes they do. Your godfather, Padfoot. Harry looked up from the letter, his heart pounding. Gornik, I think this dog might be Sirius Black. The goblin's eyes widened. An animagus? That would explain how he escaped Azkaban undetected. He studied the dog with newfound interest. Few wizards master that transformation. If this is indeed Sirius Black, he's more formidable than records suggest. The dog, Padfoot, wagged his tail hopefully, looking between Harry and Gornick. The letter calls me Prongslet, Harry said. And mentions Prongs and Lilyflower. Those must be nicknames for my parents. The Potter wills referred to Sirius Black as Padfoot in several clauses, Gornick confirmed. This aligns with that identification. Harry made a decision. Can we let him in properly? Maybe to the library? If he's really my godfather. We should take precautions, Gornick said. But yes, I believe we can proceed cautiously. He addressed the dog directly. Mr. Black, if that is indeed who you are, we will allow you to transform in a secure room. Be aware that any aggressive action will trigger defensive wards. The dog nodded, actually nodded, in apparent understanding. Gornick led them to a small study off the main hall, one with only one entrance and no windows, a defensible space, Harry realized. Once inside, the dog looked at Harry for a long moment, as if memorizing his features. Then, with a fluid motion that seemed impossible for such a large animal, it transformed. Where the dog had been, a gaunt man now stood. He was tall but painfully thin, with long, matted black hair, hollow cheeks, and the same gray eyes the dog had possessed. His clothing was tattered and dirty, hanging from his emaciated frame. Despite his haggard appearance, he smiled at Harry with such joy it transformed his face, giving a glimpse of the handsome man he must have been before whatever hardships had marked him so deeply. Harry, he said, his voice rough as if from disuse. You look so much like James. But you have Lily's eyes. He made no move to approach, seeming to understand that Harry might be wary. I'm Sirius Black. Your godfather. Though I've done a poor job of it, I'm afraid. Harry studied the man carefully. You were in prison. For something you didn't do. Sirius nodded grimly. I was framed by a man I thought was my friend, Peter Pettigrew. He was your parents' secret keeper, not me. He betrayed them to Voldemort, then faked his own death and framed me when I confronted him. Secret keeper? Harry asked, confused. Your parents were hidden under a Fidelius charm, an extremely powerful concealment spell that magically hides information inside a living person's soul, Sirius explained. Pettigrew was that person, the only one who could reveal their location. I was the obvious choice, which is why we switched to Peter as a bluff. Only. His voice broke. Only he was already working for Voldemort. Gornick interjected. This contradicts official ministry accounts, which claim you were the secret keeper and personally betrayed the Potters. I know, Sirius said bitterly. That's the story everyone believes. But Dumbledore knew I wasn't the secret keeper, he cast the Fidelius himself. He knew I was innocent, yet he allowed me to rot in Azkaban while he placed Harry with those awful muggles. Why would he do that? Harry asked, struggling to understand. Because I would have raised you as James and Lily wanted, Sirius said simply. Loved, aware of your heritage, connected to the wizarding world. That didn't fit Dumbledore's plans for the boy who lived. How did you escape Azkaban? Gornick asked, still watching Sirius warily. The prison is supposedly inescapable. A ghost of a smile crossed Sirius's face. Dementors, the guards of Azkaban, feed on human emotions. But animal emotions are simpler, less nourishing to them. As Padfoot, I could keep my sanity while others around me lost theirs. When I saw a newspaper article mentioning irregularities with Harry's guardianship, I transformed and slipped through the bars when they brought food. I've been swimming and running ever since, trying to find you. The explanation aligned with what little Harry knew of magical prisons and animagi. He found himself wanting to believe this man who had known his parents, who called him by an affectionate nickname, who had apparently suffered for years in a terrible prison and still escaped to find him. You can prove you're innocent? Harry asked cautiously. With Veritaserum, Truth Potion, or by testifying under oath before the Wisengamot, yes, Sirius confirmed. But I'd need to be granted a trial first, which the Ministry has been reluctant to do. Admitting they imprisoned an innocent man without trial would be politically damaging. Gornick and Harry exchanged glances. The hearing today focused in part on the improper setting aside of the Potter wills, Gornick said. Your case was mentioned specifically. Madame Bones seemed troubled by the lack of trial. Hope flickered across Sirius's gaunt features. Amelia Bones? She's fair, always was. If she's looking into it, there might be a chance. He looked at Harry with naked longing. I've missed so much of your life already, Harry. I should have been there for you all along. Something in Sirius's expression, the raw pain and regret, convinced Harry more than any words could have. This man had suffered terribly, yet his first thought upon escaping was to find his godson. I believe you, Harry said quietly. But what happens now? You're still a fugitive, aren't you? For the moment, Sirius acknowledged. But if the goblins are willing. He glanced at Gornick. Gringotts has always maintained a certain independence from Ministry jurisdiction. If you were to grant me sanctuary while petitioning for a proper trial. Gornick considered this. It would be unprecedented. But then, goblin guardianship of a wizard child is also unprecedented. We seem to be in a season of breaking with tradition. We could help each other, Sirius suggested. I could add my testimony about Dumbledore's actions regarding the Fidelius and provide additional insights into James and Lily's wishes for Harry. In return, Gringotts could help secure me a fair trial. And if you're exonerated? Gornick asked. Would you seek to challenge our guardianship of Mr. Potter? Sirius shook his head. Not challenge, no. But I would like to be part of Harry's life, as his parents intended. Perhaps we could find an arrangement that honors both their wishes and the care you've shown him. He looked at Harry directly. That's if you want me in your life, of course. I'd understand if you need time. Harry felt a strange mix of emotions, hope at finding a connection to his parents, wariness born of years of disappointment, and an unfamiliar yearning for family that was neither obligation nor burden but choice and love. I'd like to know you, he said finally. You were their friend. You can tell me about them. Sirius's smile was radiant despite his haggard appearance. I'd like that very much, Harry. I have so many stories to share. After further discussion, a plan emerged. Sirius would be granted sanctuary within the Potter properties, which were protected by ancient wards that could shield him from detection. Gornick would initiate legal proceedings for a formal review of his case, leveraging the revelations from the guardianship hearing. Meanwhile, Sirius would contribute to Harry's education, filling in personal details about his parents and their world that no historical account could provide. You're knackered, Harry observed as their conversation wound down, noting the exhaustion evident in Sirius's posture. When did you last sleep properly? Or eat? Sirius gave a bark of laughter that reminded Harry of his dog form. Merlin, you sound like your mother. Lily was always fussing over us when we pushed ourselves too hard. His expression softened. It's been a while. Weeks of running, snatching what rest and food I could find. Harry turned to Tippy, who had been hovering anxiously nearby. Could you prepare a room for my godfather? And maybe some food? The house elf nodded eagerly. Yes, Master Harry. Tippy will prepare the blue guest room and bring food right away. As Tippy disappeared to make arrangements, Harry felt a curious sense of rightness. For the first time in his life, he was making decisions not just for himself but for someone else, offering care rather than always being the one in need. Sirius seemed to read something of his thoughts in his expression. James would be proud of you, he said quietly. Both of them would be. Not just for who you're becoming, but for who you already are. Later that night, after Sirius had been fed, bathed, and settled into a proper bed for the first time in years, Harry sat in the library with Gringotts, processing the day's extraordinary developments. "Do you think he's really innocent?" Harry asked. "His account aligns with certain inconsistencies in the official record," Gringotts replied thoughtfully. "And his willingness to testify under veritaserum suggests sincerity. The house wards permitted his entry, which they would not do if he harbored ill intent toward the Potter heir." The goblin's expression became calculating. "Moreover, his appearance is strategically valuable. If Black is innocent, it represents another significant failure in Dumbledore's judgment, or worse, a deliberate manipulation." "You think Dumbledore knew Sirius was innocent and left him in prison anyway?" "Why would he do that?" "To maintain control over you," Gringotts said bluntly. "If Black had raised you as your parents intended, you would have grown up aware of your place in the wizarding world, with your magic uninhibited and your potential fully nurtured. Such a Harry Potter might be less inclined to follow Dumbledore's lead without question." Harry frowned, disturbed by the implications. "So Dumbledore wanted me ignorant and dependent." "It appears so," Gringotts agreed. "The question now is how he will respond to these changes in circumstances. Dumbledore did not become the most influential wizard in Britain by accepting defeat easily. He will have contingency plans." The warning left Harry unsettled but determined. Whatever Dumbledore had planned for him, whatever role the prophecy suggested he must play, he would face it on his own terms, not as the malleable tool the headmaster had tried to create, but as his parents' son, with allies who saw him as more than a weapon in a war he barely understood. The following weeks brought dramatic changes to Harry's life and education. With Sirius's addition to the household, his understanding of the wizarding world expanded in deeply personal ways. Unlike his formal instructors, who taught from books and abstract principles, Sirius taught through stories and memories, bringing the magical world to life through first-hand accounts. "Your dad was a prankster," Sirius told him one evening as they sorted through a box of photographs Ollie had found in storage. "But not mean-spirited. His targets were usually bullies or those who took themselves too seriously." Harry examined a moving photograph showing 4 teenage boys lounging under a tree near a lake. His father was instantly recognizable, Harry's own features looking back at him, though James wore glasses with round frames instead of Harry's taped rectangular ones. "That's the Marauders," Sirius explained, pointing to each figure in turn. "James, Prongs, because his animagus form was a stag. Me, Padfoot. Remus Lupin, Moony." His finger hesitated over the 4th boy, a small, mousy-looking youth. "And Peter Pettigrew, Wormtail. Rat animagus, which turned out to be fitting." "Why was Remus called Moony?" Harry asked. Sirius hesitated. "That's Remus's story to tell, if you ever meet him. He had a condition that we helped him with. It's what motivated us to become Animagi in the first place." Harry sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. "Where is Remus now? If he was one of Dad's best friends, why hasn't he been part of my life?" "Good question," Sirius said, frowning. "Dumbledore told him to stay away, apparently, claimed it was for your protection. Remus tends to defer to authority, especially Dumbledore's, who allowed him to attend Hogwarts despite his condition when others might not have." "Another way to keep me isolated," Harry observed, the pattern becoming increasingly clear. "Exactly," Sirius confirmed grimly. "Dumbledore made sure you had no connections to your parents' world, not me, not Remus, not any of their other friends." With Sirius's help, Harry began piecing together his family history beyond what formal records showed. He learned that his father had been brilliant at transfiguration, that his mother had innovated several charms still used by healers, that both had been members of an organization called the Order of the Phoenix that Dumbledore had formed to fight Voldemort. "They defied him 3 times, Sirius said one day, referencing what he knew of the prophecy. "Most who stood against Voldemort directly didn't survive the first encounter." While Sirius filled in the personal details of Harry's heritage, his formal education continued to expand. Nagnak's training in wandless magic progressed from simple levitation to more complex manipulations, lighting and extinguishing fires, manipulating water, creating minor illusions. Your affinity for earth and fire elements gives you natural advantages in certain applications, she explained during one session. Defensive magics, particularly shields and wards, should come easily to you. Healing magic as well, given the gold aspects we detected in your core. Harry found shield magic particularly intuitive. Within weeks, he could generate a visible barrier of magical energy around himself that could deflect minor physical objects. It wasn't powerful enough to stop serious attacks, but Nagnak assured him it was remarkable progress for a 7-year-old. Wizard children rely on wands because they're taught to do so, she explained. They're told wandless magic is difficult and rare, so it becomes difficult and rare for them. You're learning without those limitations. His education wasn't limited to magical subjects. As planned, Harry began attending a private Muggle school in London, traveling there each day with magical disguises that altered his appearance just enough to make him unrecognizable as Harry Potter, darkening his hair to brown, changing his eye color to hazel, and most importantly, concealing his distinctive scar. Under the name Harry Jameson, he experienced normal education without Dudley's bullying or the Dursleys' pressure to underperform. For the first time, he was free to excel, to make friends, to be simply a boy rather than a burden or a freak or a prophesied savior. The dual nature of his life, magical air in training and ordinary schoolboy, gave him perspective that most wizard-raised children lacked. He moved between worlds with increasing confidence, gradually integrating the disparate parts of his identity into a more coherent whole. Through it all, the shadow of Dumbledore's intentions and the prophecy loomed. Gornick had managed to secure a transcript of the prophecy from the Department of Mysteries, invoking ancient provisions that granted an individual the right to knowledge of prophecies in which they were specifically named. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. Harry, Sirius, and Gornick had analyzed these cryptic words from every angle, trying to understand their implications. The marking clearly refers to your scar, Sirius said. And you were definitely born as July died, to parents who defied Voldemort 3 times. But what's this power he knows not? Harry wondered. And what does it mean that neither can live while the other survives? Prophecies are notoriously ambiguous, Gornick cautioned. They can be fulfilled in unexpected ways. What matters is that Voldemort believed it and acted on it, thereby potentially setting it in motion. And Dumbledore believed it too, Sirius added. Enough to make decisions about Harry's entire life based on his interpretation of it. The legal proceedings regarding Sirius's case moved slowly but steadily forward. Madame Bones, disturbed by the irregularities surrounding his imprisonment, had ordered a formal review. Ministry records were being examined, and witnesses from the original incident were being quietly interviewed. It helps that Pettigrew's body was never found, Sirius explained. Just a finger, which could easily have been cut off deliberately to fake his death. If he's alive, where has he been all this time? Harry asked. Hiding, probably as a rat. Animagi can maintain their animal forms indefinitely. He could be anywhere, living as someone's pet. Sirius's expression darkened. But if I ever find him. Meanwhile, as Gornick had predicted, Dumbledore had not remained idle. Reports reached them through Goblin intelligence networks that the headmaster was making discreet inquiries about Harry's whereabouts and the specific nature of his Goblin guardianship. He's being careful, Gornick reported. Making no direct challenges yet, but gathering information, testing boundaries, looking for leverage. What can he do? Harry asked worriedly. The Ministry approved your guardianship. Temporarily, Gornick reminded him. The 6-month review will be his opportunity to argue for alternative arrangements. He'll likely propose a wizarding family sympathetic to his views as your new guardians. Like who? The Weasleys perhaps, Sirius suggested. Good people, loyal to Dumbledore, with a son about your age. Or the Diggorys. He'll want you with a light-aligned family he can influence. Harry bristled at the thought of being moved from one manipulated situation to another. I don't want to leave here. Or go back to the Dursleys. You won't, Sirius promised fiercely. If my case progresses as we hope, I'll be in a position to claim guardianship by the time the review comes around. Even Dumbledore couldn't argue against your parents' explicit choice once I'm exonerated. For months after Harry's escape from Privet Drive, an unexpected development occurred. Harry was in the library practicing wandless color-changing charms on a set of feathers when Tippy appeared, looking agitated. Master Harry. The wards is detecting someone trying to find the house. They cannot see it because of the Fidelius, but they is standing right outside, looking very confused. Harry exchanged alarmed glances with Sirius, who had been reading nearby. Death Eaters? No, Master Harry. It is being a wizard with shabby robes and many scars. He is carrying a letter and looking very sad. Sirius jumped to his feet. Remus, he breathed. It has to be Moony. Your friend? Harry asked, excitement mingling with caution. Yes, but how did he find this place? The Fidelius. Sirius trailed off, thinking. The letter I sent you, I didn't specify this address, just mentioned I'd found you. Remus must have tracked my magical signature somehow. He always was brilliant at detection spells. Can we let him in? Harry asked. If he's Dad's friend too. Sirius hesitated. Remus is one of the best men I know, but he's been under Dumbledore's influence all these years. We should be cautious. He thought for a moment. Tippy, can you deliver a note to him without being seen by Muggles? Yes, Master Sirius. Tippy can be invisible to Muggles. Sirius quickly scribbled a note and handed it to the elf, who disappeared with a pop. Through the library window, Harry could just see a thin, shabbily dressed man standing across the square, looking perplexed as he stared at the space between houses that the townhouse occupied, invisible to those not included in its Fidelius charm. They watched as Tippy, invisible to their eyes outside the house, apparently delivered the note. The man, Remus, startled, then read it quickly. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to cautious hope. He nodded, seemingly to thin air, and Tippy reappeared in the library. He is agreeing to the conditions, Master Sirius. He is saying he will take Veritaserum and submit to ward screening. Good, Sirius said, visibly relieved. Tell Gornick we need him here immediately, then bring Remus to the secure room where I first transformed. The next hour was tense. Gornick arrived promptly, bringing a vial of Veritaserum and conducting various magical scans before allowing Remus into the main house. Harry waited in the library, both nervous and excited at the prospect of meeting another friend of his parents. Finally, Sirius entered, accompanied by a man who looked far older than his years. Remus Lupin was thin and careworn, with prematurely gray-streaked light brown hair and a face crossed with several faint scars. But his amber eyes were kind and intelligent, and when they fell on Harry, they filled with unmistakable emotion. Harry, he said softly, stopping a respectful distance away. You look so much like James. But your eyes are my mother's, Harry finished with a smile. So I've heard. Remus glanced at Sirius. You were right in your note. He has her quick mind too. Remus has confirmed under Veritaserum that he's not reporting to Dumbledore, Sirius explained to Harry. He's been trying to find you since rumors of your disappearance from the Dursleys began circulating in certain circles. Dumbledore told me you were safe and that my condition made it dangerous for me to be part of your life, Remus said, regret heavy in his voice. I accepted that for too long. I should have insisted on at least seeing you, making sure you were truly well. What condition? Harry asked directly, remembering Sirius's evasion on the topic. Remus tensed, exchanging glances with Sirius, who nodded encouragingly. "I'm a werewolf, Harry," Remus said quietly. "I was bitten as a child. Once a month at the full moon, I transform into a wolf-like creature with no human consciousness. It's why they called me Moony." Harry considered this revelation. "So you're only dangerous during the full moon? The rest of the time you're just, you?" Remus looked surprised at this matter-of-fact response. "Yes, essentially. Though werewolves face significant prejudice in wizarding society. Many consider us dangerous all the time." "That's stupid," Harry said flatly. "It's like saying someone with a medical condition is a completely different person because of it." A startled laugh escaped Remus. "That's remarkably like something Lily would have said." His expression softened. "Your mother was fiercely opposed to the prejudice I faced. She once hexed a fellow student who made a disparaging comment about werewolves, not even knowing at the time that I was one." With Remus's addition to his growing circle of allies, Harry gained yet another perspective on his parents and the wizarding world. Where Sirius was passionate and impulsive, full of exciting stories about adventures and pranks, Remus was thoughtful and scholarly, sharing insights into Lily's academic brilliance and James's growth from entitled youth to principled man. "Your father changed significantly in his last years at Hogwarts," Remus explained one afternoon as he helped Harry with a particularly tricky bit of arithmancy. He realized that privilege came with responsibility, not just entitlement. By the time he and Lily married, he was fighting for justice, not just against Voldemort but against the systemic prejudices that allowed dark wizards to gain followers in the first place. Between his formal tutors, Sirius's stories, Remus's insights, and Gornick's strategic guidance, Harry's education progressed at an extraordinary pace. By the 5-month mark of his life away from the Dursleys, he had developed magical abilities that would have been impressive in a student years older, not just academic knowledge, but practical skills across multiple magical disciplines. His wandless abilities now included basic shields, levitation of objects up to the weight of a small chair, minor transfigurations of simple objects, and the ability to produce light, warmth, and even small controlled flames. He could brew several basic potions under supervision, identify dozens of magical herbs and their properties, and understand the fundamental principles of arithmetic equations that underpinned more complex spells. More importantly, he had developed a confidence and sense of self that would have been impossible in his previous life. He was no longer freak or boy, but Harry Potter, son of James and Lily, godson of Sirius, student of Nagnok, friend of Remus, ward of the goblins. He had a history, a present, and a future that belonged to him rather than to others' expectations. This transformation did not go unnoticed. As the 6-month review of his guardianship approached, evidence mounted that Dumbledore was preparing a comprehensive challenge. "He's mobilizing significant political capital," Gornick reported during a strategy meeting in mid-December. Speaking privately with Wizengamot members, highlighting the unprecedented nature of goblin guardianship, suggesting it violates the spirit of wizarding family law. "He's also met with the Weasleys twice in the past month," Remus added. He had been cautiously reconnecting with old Order of the Phoenix contacts, gathering intelligence on Dumbledore's movements. Arthur mentioned to a ministry colleague that they're considering expanding their family in the new year. "He's positioning them as alternative guardians," Sirius concluded grimly. "Molly and Arthur are good people, but they're firmly in Dumbledore's camp." Harry felt a flicker of panic at the thought of being uprooted again, placed with strangers who, however well-intentioned, would be following Dumbledore's guidance rather than respecting his autonomy. "What about your case?" he asked Sirius anxiously. "Any progress?" A slow smile spread across his godfather's face. "Actually, yes. Significant progress. Madame Bones called me in for a confidential hearing yesterday under Veritaserum. I told them everything, about the switch to Peter as secret keeper, about confronting him after James and Lily died, about how he framed me by blowing up the street and escaping as a rat." "And they believed you?" Harry asked hopefully. "Veritaserum doesn't leave much room for doubt," Sirius confirmed. "They're keeping it quiet for now, but they've launched a search for Pettigrew. If they find him, or even find evidence supporting my account, I could be officially exonerated before the guardianship review. This news buoyed Harry's spirits considerably. If Sirius were legally cleared, his claim as Harry's rightful guardian would be nearly unassailable, even by Dumbledore. 2 weeks before the scheduled review, they received unexpected news through Gornick's intelligence network. Amelia Bones had authorized a raid on a wizarding home in Devon following a tip regarding an unregistered animagus matching Peter Pettigrew's rat form. They found him living as a pet with the Weasley family, of all people, Gornick reported. Apparently he's been their son Percy's rat for years. The Weasleys? Harry repeated, shocked. The same family Dumbledore wants me to live with? The very same, Gornick confirmed. Though there's no evidence they knew the rat's true identity. By all accounts, they're as horrified as anyone. But the timing is suspicious, Remus noted thoughtfully. Just as Dumbledore begins positioning them as Harry's potential guardians, their son's pet is revealed as the man who betrayed the Potters. Dumbledore's plans often have multiple layers, Sirius said darkly. He may have known or suspected Pettigrew's location for some time and held the information in reserve for when it might be strategically useful. Using the Weasleys as unwitting pawns, Harry said, disturbed by the calculation such a plan would require. It's conjecture, Gornick cautioned. But it aligns with his pattern of manipulating circumstances to serve his broader agenda. The capture of Peter Pettigrew accelerated the review of Sirius's case dramatically. 3 days before Christmas, and 10 days before Harry's guardianship review, Sirius received official notification from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement that all charges against him had been dropped. The ministry offered a formal apology for his wrongful imprisonment and a substantial financial settlement as compensation. I'm free, Sirius said in wonder, reading the parchment for the 3rd time. Legally, officially free. And my godfather, Harry added, unable to contain his grin. And eligible to claim guardianship, Gornick finished, satisfaction evident in his voice. Dumbledore's primary strategy has just collapsed. The guardianship review, when it finally arrived, was almost anticlimactic. With Sirius officially exonerated and recognized as Harry's godfather and designated guardian according to his parents' wills, Dumbledore's carefully constructed arguments for alternative arrangements fell flat. The headmaster attended the hearing, of course, presenting himself with the same grandfatherly demeanor he had displayed at the initial proceeding. But the panel, again led by Amelia Bones, was unmoved by his concerns about Harry's security and appropriate wizarding upbringing. Mr. Potter has demonstrably thrived under the current arrangement, Madame Bones noted, reviewing the educational assessments and health reports submitted by the goblins. His magical development is proceeding appropriately, he is receiving proper education in both wizarding and Muggle subjects, and his physical health has improved significantly since leaving his relatives' care. I do not dispute his material improvement, Dumbledore conceded graciously. Merely whether this unusual guardianship serves his long-term interests, particularly given the unique challenges he may face in the future. You refer to the prophecy, Madame Longbottom said sharply. Among other considerations, yes. Dumbledore's blue eyes were grave. Harry's destiny is intertwined with forces beyond ordinary understanding. His preparation requires careful guidance. Your guidance, specifically? Sirius interjected, unable to remain silent. His formal wizarding robes couldn't quite hide the lingering effects of Azkaban, but his eyes were clear and his voice steady. The same guidance that left him with abusive muggles, his magic bound, and a piece of Voldemort in his head? Dumbledore sighed heavily. I have acknowledged mistakes in my approach, Sirius. But the broader strategy nearly destroyed him, Sirius interrupted. And would have continued doing so if the goblins hadn't intervened. I believe this panel has sufficient information to make its determination, Madame Bones interjected before the exchange could escalate further. Mr. Potter, do you have any statement you wish to make regarding your preferences for future guardianship? Harry stood, conscious of all eyes upon him. He had practiced what he wanted to say, but still felt nervous addressing such important wizards and witches directly. "I'm grateful to the goblins for their guardianship when I had no one else," he began. "They've taught me about my heritage and helped me develop my magic safely. But now that my godfather has been exonerated, I would like to live with him, as my parents wanted." He met Dumbledore's gaze directly. "I've learned a lot in 6 months, Professor. About magic, about my family, and about the choices adults have made for me without my knowledge or consent. I'd like the chance to have some say in my own life now." A flicker of something, regret, resignation, passed across Dumbledore's features. "You have indeed learned much, Harry. I only hope it has prepared you for what lies ahead." The panel's decision was unanimous. Primary guardianship would transfer to Sirius Black, with the provision that Harry continue his current educational arrangements, including both magical and Muggle schooling. The goblins would retain financial guardianship of the Potter estate until Harry reached the age of 15, ensuring continuity in the management of his inheritance. As they left the ministry after the hearing, Harry felt a profound sense of closure. The path ahead would not be simple. Dumbledore's cryptic warning about what lies ahead suggested challenges yet to come, and the prophecy's implications remained troubling. But he would face those challenges with true allies at his side, not as the ignorant, isolated child Dumbledore had tried to create. That evening, back at the townhouse, soon to be Sirius's legal residence as well as Harry's, they celebrated with a small feast prepared by the elated house elves. Gornik, Nagnok, Remus, and several other tutors who had become part of Harry's extended circle joined them. A toast, Sirius proposed, raising his glass. To Harry James Potter, who defied expectations, escaped manipulation, and began forging his own path at the tender age of 7. And to those who helped him do it, Harry added, raising his own glass of pumpkin juice. The goblins who saw what wizards ignored, the godfather who escaped the inescapable to find me, and the friends who chose truth over convenient lies. As glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, Harry caught Gornik watching him with an expression of quiet satisfaction. "Thank you," Harry said quietly when he managed to speak with the goblin alone. "For the letter that started everything. For seeing the darkness in my scar when Dumbledore ignored it. For giving me a chance at a real life." "You have done the hard work yourself, Mr. Potter," Gornik replied. "We merely opened a door. You chose to walk through it and face whatever lay beyond." The goblin's shrewd eyes held respect rather than the condescension most wizards showed toward magical beings. "Remember this lesson as you continue your journey. The most important magic is not found in spells or potions or prophecies, but in the choices we make when confronted with truth." Later that night, as Harry prepared for bed, he stood at his window overlooking the London Square, now dusted with December snow. So much had changed in 6 months, his understanding of himself, his place in the world, his past and his possible futures. The boy who lived had become something more, the boy who chose. Who chose knowledge over ignorance, difficult truths over comforting lies, and his own path over the one laid out for him by others. Somewhere out there, Dumbledore was no doubt revising his plans, adapting to this unexpected development in his grand strategy. Somewhere, perhaps, the remnants of Voldemort were stirring, still bound to the world by unknown Horcruxes beyond the one that had been purged from Harry's scar. These shadows would need to be confronted someday. But not tonight. Tonight, Harry Potter was simply a boy who had found his place in the world, not the cupboard where he'd been hidden, not the pedestal where others wished to place him, but the path he was building step by step, choice by choice, surrounded by those who saw him for himself rather than for what he represented. He closed the curtains on the winter night and turned toward the warmth of his room, toward the future he was now free to create. Chapter 3, The Boy Who Chose. Spring sunshine filtered through the high windows of the dueling chamber, casting long rectangles of light across the polished wooden floor. Harry Potter, now 8 years old, stood at the center of the room, feet planted shoulder-width apart, hands extended before him. Across from him, Sirius Black circled slowly, his own stance casual but alert. "Remember," Sirius called, "intent shapes magic more than movement. Feel the shield forming, don't just think about it. Harry nodded, focusing on the warm current of magic flowing through his body. After months of practice, he could sense it clearly, earth magic, solid and protective, with flickers of fire energy that sparked when his emotions ran high. He drew the current up from his core, channeling it through pathways that Nagnok had taught him to develop, directing it outward through his palms. The air before him shimmered, coalescing into a translucent golden barrier. Good. Sirius approved. Now hold it while I, without warning, he flicked his wand, sending a jet of water toward Harry's shield. The liquid splashed against the magical barrier, running down its surface without penetrating. Excellent, Sirius grinned. Again, but stronger this time. Harry maintained his focus as Sirius cast progressively more forceful spells, stinging hexes, minor jinxes, and finally a moderate knockback jinx that hit the shield with visible impact. The golden barrier flickered but held, though Harry felt the drain on his magical reserves. That's enough, said a gravelly voice from the doorway. Gornik stood watching, his shrewd eyes evaluating Harry's performance. You're pushing too hard. Remember what Nagnok taught you about magical exhaustion. Harry released the shield, feeling a momentary lightheadedness as the sustained magic dissipated. I had more, he protested mildly. Undoubtedly, Gornik agreed, entering the chamber. But magical growth requires balance between exertion and recovery. Even adult wizards can deplete their cores through overextension. Sirius nodded, tucking his wand away. He's right, pup. You've made incredible progress, but your core is still developing. No need to rush. Harry wiped sweat from his forehead, acknowledging their wisdom even as part of him chafed at the limitations. In the 10 months since the goblins had removed Voldemort's soul fragment from his scar, his magical abilities had grown exponentially. Without Dumbledore's bindings or the Horcrux's drain, his natural power had flourished under proper training. Yet sometimes it felt like an invisible clock was ticking, time passing too quickly before he would need to face whatever destiny the prophecy had laid out for him. Your wandless shielding has improved significantly, Gornik observed, changing the subject. Few adult wizards achieve such results even with wands. Thanks to Nagnok's training, Harry said, giving credit where it was due. And the meditation techniques you taught me. The techniques merely provided structure, Gornik corrected. Your progress stems from your dedication and natural affinity. The goblin consulted a small timepiece. Speaking of which, Nagnok expects you in 30 minutes for advanced theory. Something about elemental transmutation principles. Harry nodded, excitement replacing his momentary frustration. Magical theory had become one of his favorite subjects, particularly the goblin approach which differed significantly from standard wizarding education. I'll clean up and head to the library, he promised. As Gornik departed, Sirius clapped a hand on Harry's shoulder. You really are exceptional, you know. James would be strutting around like a peacock, bragging about you to anyone who'd listen. And my mum? Harry asked, always hungry for these small insights into his parents. Lily would be making lists of additional subjects for you to study, Sirius chuckled. She believed in balanced education, magical theory alongside practical applications, wizarding traditions alongside innovative approaches. His expression softened. But mostly, she'd just be proud of who you're becoming, not just what you can do. These casual references to his parents had become precious to Harry. Through Sirius and Remus's stories, supplemented by memories viewed in a pensieve that Gornik had procured for educational purposes, he had built a more complete picture of James and Lily Potter than he'd ever thought possible. They were no longer just names or hazy concepts but real people with strengths, flaws, hopes, and dreams, many of which had centered around their son. After cleaning up and changing into fresh clothes, Harry made his way to the library of the London townhouse that had become home. In the months since the guardianship hearing, the house had transformed subtly. While still recognizable as a traditional wizarding residence, it now reflected its inhabitants' eclectic nature, magical artifacts shared space with Muggle books, wizarding photographs alongside modern art that Sirius had developed a taste for during his post-Azkaban recovery. Nagnok was already waiting in the library, arranging crystals of various colors on the large oak table. The female goblin had become one of Harry's most demanding teachers, but also one he deeply respected for her vast knowledge and refusal to simplify concepts she believed he could grasp with proper effort. "You're 30 seconds late," she noted without looking up. "Sorry, Mistress Nagnok," Harry replied, taking his seat at the table. The shielding practice with Sirius ran long. "Humph, show me your magical centers." This had become a standard beginning to their sessions, a quick assessment of Harry's magical state. He closed his eyes, turning his awareness inward to the swirling currents of energy within him. Following pathways he now knew intimately, he identified the primary centers where his magic gathered most strongly: core, heart, hands, and now increasingly, his eyes. "Core stable but showing signs of recent exertion," he reported. "Heart center calm. Hand pathways clear. Visual center developing but still diffuse." "Acceptable," Nagnok grunted. "Today we advance beyond basic elemental theory into practical transmutation. Observe." She selected a clear crystal and placed it between her palms. After a moment of concentration, the crystal began to glow with inner light, changing from transparent to a deep amber color. "Elemental conversion," she explained. "Not transfiguration as wizards practice it, which imposes form through will, but true alchemical change, coaxing the material to express different inherent properties." Harry leaned forward, fascinated. "Like the difference between forcing something to look different versus helping it become something it could naturally be?" "Precisely." Nagnok's eyes gleamed with approval. "Wizarding transfiguration imposes the caster's vision. Goblin transmutation reveals hidden potential within the material itself. Both have value, but different applications and limitations." The lesson proceeded from theory to practical attempts. By the end of 2 hours, Harry had managed to alter the internal structure of a small quartz crystal, creating faint veins of gold-colored minerals within it. "A promising start," Nagnok acknowledged. "Practice the visualization techniques daily. Next week we'll attempt more complex transmutations." As she packed away her materials, Harry broached a subject that had been on his mind. "Mistress Nagnok, I've been thinking about the difference between goblin and wizard magic. Wizards rely so heavily on wands, but goblins achieve similar or better results without them. Why don't more wizards learn wandless techniques?" Nagnok's expression grew contemplative. "A complex question with multiple answers. Partly tradition, wizards have used wands for millennia and built their educational system around them. Partly control, wand-based magic is more easily regulated by governing bodies. And partly..." She paused, considering her words carefully, deliberate limitation. "Limitation? You mean wizards are purposely taught to be dependent on wands? Consider the implications, Mr. Potter. If wizards believed they needed wands to perform significant magic, what happens when those wands are taken away? What happens to a society that can be disarmed simply by removing a wooden stick from their possession?" The strategic disadvantage was immediately obvious to Harry. They become vulnerable. Controllable. Indeed. Nagnok nodded grimly. "Goblins were prohibited from carrying wands after the rebellions, yet our magic remains powerful. Other magical beings develop their innate abilities without focusing tools. Only wizards have convinced themselves they cannot function magically without external implements. So wandless magic isn't actually rare or exceptionally difficult. It's just, undertaught. For average magical tasks, correct. Exceptionally complex magic may still benefit from focusing tools, but most everyday spells could be performed wandlessly with proper training." Nagnok fixed him with a serious gaze. "Which is why your education has emphasized internal magical development first. When you eventually receive a wand, it will amplify abilities you already possess, not serve as a crutch for abilities you've never developed." This perspective shifted something fundamental in Harry's understanding of magical education. It wasn't just Dumbledore who had sought to control his development, the entire wizarding educational system seemed designed to create a specific type of dependency. The revelation stayed with him throughout the afternoon as he moved through his schedule: potions with Madame Blackwood, magical history with Mr. Thornwick, and finally, his regular Muggle studies with Ms. Winters, a squib tutor who helped him maintain pace with his Muggle school curriculum during holidays. That evening, during dinner with Sirius and Remus, Harry raised the question that had been preoccupying him. Is magical education deliberately designed to make wizards dependent on wands? Sirius paused, fork halfway to his mouth. That's a rather philosophical question for dinner conversation. Remus, however, looked thoughtful. It's not a perspective I'd considered before, but there's some logic to it. The Ministry does track and regulate wands carefully. A wizard without a wand is considered effectively neutralized in most law enforcement contexts. But why would the magical community handicap itself that way? Harry pressed. It seems like such an obvious vulnerability. Most magical societies developed in isolation, Remus explained. The threats they prepared for came from within, other wizards with similar limitations. It's only relatively recently, historically speaking, that cross-cultural magical education has become more common. There's also the matter of control, Sirius added, his expression darkening. The pureblood families who traditionally dominated wizarding government benefit from a system where magical ability can be regulated through wand restrictions. Can't have the masses too capable of defending themselves without approved tools, can we? Harry digested this, connecting it to other patterns he'd observed in his magical history lessons. So it's like how certain spells are classified as dark, even though magic itself isn't inherently good or evil, it's about controlling who can do what and when. Now you're thinking like your mother, Remus smiled. Lily was always questioning the arbitrary distinctions in magical classification. She believed intent and action determined morality, not the inherent nature of the magic itself. Which got her into quite a few heated debates with more traditional professors, Sirius recalled fondly. Particularly when she demonstrated that several light charms could cause serious harm if misused, while some supposedly dark spells had beneficial applications in the right circumstances. This information about his mother resonated with Harry's developing worldview. The more he learned about magic, the more he recognized that the categories and limitations presented as absolute facts were often artificial constructs serving particular agendas. Is that why Dumbledore bound my magic instead of teaching me to control it? He asked quietly. Because controlled wizards are easier to direct than empowered ones? A heavy silence fell over the table. Finally, Sirius sighed. Dumbledore's motivations are rarely simple, Pup. I believe he genuinely wants to defeat Voldemort and protect the wizarding world. But he's grown accustomed to being the chess master, moving pieces according to his grand strategy. His gray eyes met Harry's. And you, as the prophecy child, represent his most important piece. Not anymore, Harry said with quiet determination. I'm not his piece or his weapon or his sacrifice. Whatever this prophecy means, I'll face it on my terms, not his. Well said, Remus approved, though concern lingered in his amber eyes. Just remember that facing things on your own terms doesn't mean facing them alone. You have people who will stand with you, whatever comes. Later that night, Harry sat cross-legged on his bed, practicing the meditation techniques that had become his nightly ritual. As he followed the familiar pathways of his magic, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in less than a year. From a neglected child in a cupboard to the heir of an ancient family, learning magic beyond what most adult wizards mastered, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for his well-being rather than his utility, the transformation seemed almost too profound to be real sometimes. Yet challenges remained. Dumbledore had been relatively quiet since the guardianship hearing, but Harry harbored no illusions that the headmaster had abandoned his plans. The prophecy still loomed, its cryptic words suggesting an eventual confrontation with Voldemort that couldn't be avoided. And somewhere out there, the Dark Lord himself existed in some diminished form, potentially seeking restoration. One step at a time, Harry murmured to himself, echoing Gornick's frequent advice. The path ahead might be uncertain, but he was equipping himself to walk it with awareness rather than blind obedience to others' directions. That, perhaps, was the greatest magic he had learned so far, the power of informed choice. Spring melted into summer, bringing Harry's 9th birthday and an unexpected development in the ongoing chess match with Albus Dumbledore. The invitation arrived by owl during breakfast, an official Hogwarts letter addressed in emerald ink to Mr. Harry Potter, the East Bedroom, 7, Griffin Square, London. The specificity of the address confirmed what Harry had already suspected. Despite the property's fidelious charm, Dumbledore had somehow determined his location. "He's making a move," Sirius observed, examining the heavy parchment envelope. "Question is, what game is he playing now?" Harry opened the letter carefully. "Dear Mr. Potter, I hope this message finds you well. First, allow me to extend belated birthday wishes for your recent celebration. I write to request a meeting at your convenience to discuss several matters of importance regarding your future education and certain family legacies that have come to my attention. While I understand our previous interactions have left you with justifiable reservations about my intentions, I believe a direct conversation may resolve misunderstandings and establish a more productive relationship moving forward. As a gesture of good faith, I am prepared to return an item that rightfully belongs to you, your father's invisibility cloak, which James entrusted to me shortly before his death. This remarkable heirloom deserves to be in your possession, regardless of whether you choose to meet with me. If you are amenable to a conversation, please suggest a time and neutral location of your choosing. I will abide by any reasonable conditions you wish to set for our meeting. Yours sincerely, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore Headmaster, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Interesting timing, Remus remarked after reading the letter over Harry's shoulder. Nearly 2 years since the guardianship was settled, with minimal contact, and now suddenly he's offering family heirlooms and requesting meetings. The invisibility cloak Gornick mentioned, Harry noted. He said it was unusually powerful, that it had maintained its effectiveness for generations when most invisibility cloaks deteriorate. James treasured that cloak, Sirius confirmed. Passed down through the Potter line for centuries. He used to say it felt almost alive sometimes, responding to his needs beyond simple invisibility. Harry studied the letter again, trying to discern Dumbledore's true motives. Why now? What's changed that makes him reach out after leaving me alone for so long? Perhaps nothing specific has changed, Remus suggested thoughtfully. Perhaps it's more about what hasn't changed, namely, his need to ensure you'll eventually fulfill the role he envisions for you in the prophecy. Or he's received new information about Voldemort, Sirius added grimly. Intelligence suggesting movement or potential return. Whatever Dumbledore's reasons, Harry recognized that simply ignoring the outreach would be a missed opportunity. Despite his justified wariness, he was curious about what the headmaster might reveal in a direct conversation, and about the family heirloom being offered. After consulting with his guardians and Gornick, Harry composed a careful response. Professor Dumbledore, thank you for your birthday wishes and for the offer to return my father's cloak, which I would indeed like to receive regardless of any meeting. I am willing to meet under the following conditions. 1. The meeting will take place at Gringotts Bank in a neutral conference room. 2. My godfather Sirius Black and account manager Gornick will be present. 3. All parties will agree to basic truth binding for the duration of the meeting, not veritaserum, but a mild charm that prevents deliberate falsehoods. 4. The meeting will last no more than 1 hour. If these terms are acceptable, I am available next Thursday at 10 a.m. Sincerely, Harry J. Potter. Dumbledore's response arrived the following day, accepting all conditions with a brief note expressing appreciation for Harry's willingness to meet. The stage was set for a confrontation that had been brewing since Harry first received the Gringotts letter 2 years ago. In preparation, Harry spent the days before the meeting reviewing everything he knew about Dumbledore, prophecies, and Voldemort with his various mentors. Gornick provided strategic advice on negotiation, Remus offered insights into Dumbledore's psychological patterns, and Sirius drilled him on maintaining emotional equilibrium under pressure. Remember, Sirius emphasized during their final preparation session, Dumbledore is a master of appearing reasonable while steering conversations toward his preferred outcomes. Stay focused on your own objectives. When Thursday arrived, Harry dressed in formal robes that balanced wizarding tradition with practical comfort, dark green with subtle silver embroidery that acknowledged his status without ostentation. The Potter heir ring gleamed on his right hand, a tangible reminder of his heritage and the protection it offered. Gringotts had arranged a conference room that struck a careful balance, formal enough for serious discussion but not intimidating, with a round table that eliminated hierarchical positioning. Goblin wards ensured privacy while the agreed-upon truth charm was built into the room itself, activating automatically once all parties entered. Dumbledore arrived precisely at 10, wearing midnight blue robes spangled with silver stars that somehow managed to look both whimsical and dignified. His long white beard was neatly groomed, and his blue eyes twinkled behind half-moon spectacles. He carried a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "Harry," he said warmly, inclining his head. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. Sirius, Master Gornick." He acknowledged the others with similar courtesy. "Headmaster," Harry replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Please, sit." As they took their places around the table, Harry felt the subtle tingle of magic as the truth charm activated. Not as compelling as Veritaserum, but sufficient to prevent outright lies while still allowing careful wording and omission. "I've brought your father's cloak, as promised," Dumbledore began, sliding the package across the table. "A remarkable magical artifact that has served the Potter family for generations." Harry unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a shimmering, silvery gray material that seemed to flow like water between his fingers. The moment he touched it, he felt an immediate connection, a sense of rightness, as if the cloak recognized him. "Thank you for returning it," he said sincerely, folding the cloak with care. "May I ask why you had it in the first place?" "James entrusted it to me shortly before going into hiding," Dumbledore explained. "I had expressed scholarly interest in its unusual properties, and he generously allowed me to study it. Sadly, events overtook us before I could return it." The truth charm remained inactive, suggesting Dumbledore's account was technically accurate, though Harry suspected it wasn't the complete story. "You mentioned matters regarding my future education," Harry prompted, moving the conversation forward. "Indeed." Dumbledore steepled his fingers. "While I understand and respect the excellent private education you've been receiving, I wish to discuss your eventual attendance at Hogwarts. As the Potter heir, your place at the school has been secured since birth, but given our complicated history, I thought it prudent to address any concerns you might have about attending while I remain headmaster." Harry hadn't expected such a direct acknowledgement. "I've always planned to attend Hogwarts," he replied carefully. "It's where my parents learned magic, and despite our differences, I recognize its educational value." Relief flickered across Dumbledore's features. "I'm pleased to hear it. Hogwarts has much to offer beyond formal instruction, friendships, community, traditions that connect generations of magical practitioners. And specific resources related to Voldemort and the prophecy?" Harry suggested, deciding to address the unspoken agenda directly. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "You are perceptive, Harry. Yes, Hogwarts contains historical records and magical knowledge that may prove relevant to understanding Tom Riddle's path and the prophecy that connects you." "Tom Riddle?" "Voldemort's birth name," Dumbledore clarified. "He was once a student at Hogwarts himself, before he embraced darkness and created his new identity." This was new information, and Harry filed it away for future research. "You believe he'll return, don't you? That's why you're reaching out now." Dumbledore sighed, suddenly looking every year of his considerable age. "I do. The Horcrux that was embedded in your scar confirms what I had long suspected. Tom took extraordinary measures to ensure he could not truly die. I believe he created multiple such anchors, meaning his spirit remains tethered to this world despite his physical destruction." "Then why leave one in me?" Harry asked, the question that had burned within him since learning the truth. "If you suspected what it was, why not remove it immediately? A fair and difficult question, Dumbledore acknowledged. The truth is, Harry, that until the goblins demonstrated otherwise, I believed the Horcrux's removal might require your death. The truth charm remained inactive, though Harry noted the careful phrasing. I spent years researching alternatives, searching for a method that would destroy the fragment while preserving you. Yet the goblins found a solution in days, Gornick interjected, his voice cold. Using magics not generally accessible to wizards, Dumbledore countered. Had I known such options existed, I would have pursued them immediately. The charm flickered briefly, suggesting some element of this statement stretched the truth. You could have asked, Harry said quietly. You're supposedly one of the greatest wizards alive. You hold multiple positions of international authority. Yet it never occurred to you to consult with magical beings who might have different knowledge. A significant oversight, Dumbledore admitted, genuine regret in his voice. One of many I made regarding your care. My focus on the greater threat, Voldemort's potential return, narrowed my perspective in ways that caused you unnecessary suffering. For the first time, Harry sensed complete honesty from the headmaster. That's what I don't understand, he said. You clearly want to defeat Voldemort. You clearly believe I'm somehow key to that goal. So why handle my upbringing in ways that left me ignorant, magically stunted, and physically neglected? How did that serve anyone's interests, even your strategic ones? Dumbledore was silent for a long moment, seemingly wrestling with himself. Finally, he spoke carefully. I believed that a certain humility would be essential to the role you might eventually need to play. That growing up away from fame and adulation would shape your character in necessary ways. The charm flickered more strongly this time. You're not being entirely truthful, Sirius noted sharply. Dumbledore sighed. The complete truth is difficult to articulate without sounding callous, which I do not intend. He looked directly at Harry. The prophecy states that you have power the Dark Lord knows not. I interpreted this not as raw magical ability, which Tom has in abundance, but as something more fundamental, perhaps the capacity for love, sacrifice, moral courage. I feared that growing up in the wizarding world, surrounded by privilege and acclaim for an achievement you couldn't even remember, might develop different qualities. You wanted me humble enough to sacrifice myself when the time came, Harry said flatly. Grateful enough for any kindness that I'd follow your guidance without question. The charm remained inactive, confirming the accuracy of Harry's assessment. Not consciously, perhaps, Dumbledore conceded, looking troubled. But I cannot deny that my plans for your development included ensuring you would prioritize others' welfare above your own, a quality your mother exemplified when she gave her life for you. Anger flared in Harry, hot and bright, but he contained it through the meditation techniques he'd practiced for months. My mother chose her sacrifice, he said evenly. You were engineering mine without my knowledge or consent. A distinction I failed to adequately consider, Dumbledore acknowledged, genuine regret evident in his voice. In focusing on the prophecy's fulfillment, I lost sight of the child at its center. Gornick, who had been observing silently, leaned forward. What specifically brings you here now, Headmaster? After nearly 2 years of minimal contact, something has prompted this outreach. Dumbledore hesitated, then nodded, accepting the direction change. There have been disturbances, suggesting Tom's spirit is becoming more active. Nothing concrete enough to alarm the ministry, but sufficient to concern those of us who understand the signs. I believe he is seeking a means of restoration. What kind of disturbances? Sirius asked sharply. Unexplained magical fluctuations in Albania, where I believe his spirit fled after the encounter with Harry. Reports of animals behaving strangely, dying mysteriously. Similar patterns to what occurred before he possessed Professor Quirrell several years ago, an incident that was contained before becoming public knowledge. He possessed someone at Hogwarts? Harry asked, alarmed. Briefly. Quirinus Quirrell was a professor of Muggle studies who took a sabbatical to gain practical experience. He returned changed, requesting a transfer to Defense Against the Dark Arts. I suspected something was amiss but allowed the appointment to keep him where I could monitor him. Dumbledore's expression darkened. By mid-year, it became clear Tom was partially possessing him, using him to attempt access to a powerful magical artifact secured at Hogwarts. The possession was discovered and ended before students returned from Christmas holidays. Harry exchanged glances with Sirius and Gornick, processing the implications. So you believe he's growing stronger? Looking for another host or another way to restore himself? Yes. Which is why I felt it necessary to establish a more cooperative relationship with you, despite our past differences. Dumbledore leaned forward earnestly. Harry, whatever mistakes I've made, and they have been significant, the threat Tom poses is real. The prophecy exists for a reason. I am not asking you to blindly follow my direction, but to consider the possibility that our combined knowledge and resources might better prepare you for what lies ahead. It was, Harry had to admit, a reasonable proposition. Despite his justified anger at Dumbledore's past actions, he couldn't deny the headmaster possessed valuable information and abilities that could be useful against Voldemort. What specifically are you proposing? He asked cautiously. An exchange of information, to start, Dumbledore replied. I have been researching Tom's past and the nature of Horcruxes since the night your parents died. I believe I have identified several objects he may have used to house soul fragments. In return, I would appreciate insights from the goblin analysis of the fragment removed from your scar, which might confirm or refine my theories. Gornick spoke before Harry could respond. The findings from our analysis are Mr. Potter's private information. Any sharing would be at his sole discretion and would require formal magical contracts regarding the use of such knowledge. Understandable precautions, Dumbledore agreed readily. I would expect nothing less. Harry considered the proposal carefully. The idea of working with Dumbledore in any capacity made him uneasy, but pragmatism suggested that coordinated efforts against Voldemort would be more effective than parallel but separate approaches. I'll consider an information exchange, he said finally. But with clear boundaries. Any collaboration would be as equals with mutual goals, not as mentor and student or commander and soldier. A reasonable condition, Dumbledore nodded. Though I hope you might still accept occasional guidance from someone with more experience in these matters. Guidance, yes. Control, no. Harry's voice was firm. And complete transparency about anything that directly concerns me. No more secrets, for my own good. Something like respect flickered in Dumbledore's eyes. You've grown remarkably in these past years, Harry. Your parents would be proud of the young man you're becoming. He paused, then added with apparent difficulty, I was wrong to have underestimated your capacity to handle difficult truths. That is perhaps my greatest regret regarding decisions I made after their deaths. The truth charm remained inactive, suggesting sincere remorse. Harry didn't find it entirely mollifying, but he acknowledged it with a nod. There's one more matter I wish to discuss, Dumbledore continued. A suggestion rather than a request. While your private education has clearly been exemplary, I believe there would be value in you spending some time with children your own age before entering Hogwarts. Developing social bonds, experiencing the dynamics of friendship and peer interaction. These experiences are valuable preparation for the school environment. Harry had actually been considering this issue himself. While he enjoyed his Muggle school, those friendships remained somewhat limited by the need to conceal his magical identity. And his only regular contact with magical children came through brief interactions during visits to wizarding locations like Diagon Alley. I've been thinking along similar lines, he admitted. Do you have specific suggestions? Several magical families have children near your age who will be attending Hogwarts in your year. The Weasleys, whom you may recall were mentioned during your guardianship hearings, have a son named Ronald. The Bones family has a niece, Susan, being raised by Amelia Bones herself. Neville Longbottom. Harry interrupted. Related to Alice Longbottom, whom my parents named as an alternative guardian? Yes. Neville is her son. He lives with his grandmother, Augusta, who participated in your guardianship hearing. Alice and her husband Frank were tortured into insensibility by Death Eaters shortly after your parents' deaths. They reside permanently in St. Mungo's Hospital. Harry felt a pang of connection to this unknown boy who had also lost his parents to Voldemort's followers. "I'd like to meet him," he said decisively. "And the others as well, perhaps. I can arrange introductions if you wish," Dumbledore offered. "Or merely provide contact information for your guardians to manage as they see fit." "The latter would be preferable," Sirius interjected. "We can coordinate appropriate social interactions." The meeting concluded shortly thereafter with tentative agreements to share limited information about Horcruxes and to establish contact with several magical families who had children Harry's age. While not exactly warm, the interaction had been more productive than Harry had initially expected. As Dumbledore prepared to leave, he paused, looking at Harry with an expression that mingled regret and hope. "May I offer one last observation, Harry?" Harry nodded cautiously. "The greatest power is not in what magic we can perform, but in how we choose to use it." Your mother understood this profoundly. Her sacrifice was powerful not because she died, but because she chose love over self-preservation. The old wizard's eyes were earnest. "Whatever path you take, with or without my involvement, remember that it is our choices that define us, far more than our abilities or the expectations others place upon us." With that surprisingly humble note, Dumbledore departed, leaving Harry with much to consider. "Well," Sirius said into the silence that followed, "that was more productive and less manipulative than I expected." "Dumbledore adapts his approach when direct control fails," Gornick observed shrewdly. "He's now attempting influence through cooperation rather than direction. Still seeking to shape events, but acknowledging he must work with your agency rather than around it." Harry nodded, still processing the meeting's revelations. "At least we know more about what we're facing. Multiple Horcruxes, Voldemort actively seeking restoration." He picked up his father's invisibility cloak, feeling its silky texture between his fingers. "And I have another piece of my parents' legacy." "That cloak is remarkable," Sirius noted, watching Harry examine it. "James said it had been in his family for generations without deteriorating, which is unheard of for invisibility cloaks. They typically start failing after a decade or so." Gornick mentioned that when we first discussed my inheritance, Harry recalled. "He said it might be more than an ordinary magical artifact." "Indeed," the goblin confirmed. "Gringotts records indicate the cloak has been in the Potter family for at least 12 generations with no loss of efficacy. Some ancient notes suggest it might be connected to certain legends." "Legends?" Harry prompted. "Wizard children's stories, mainly," Gornick said dismissively. "The tale of the three brothers, a morality fable about three magical objects supposedly created by Death himself, an unbeatable wand, a stone to recall the dead, and a perfect invisibility cloak that never fades or fails. The Deathly Hallows," Sirius added, his expression thoughtful. "Most consider it just a story, but some believe the objects were real magical artifacts created by particularly gifted wizards of the Peverell line, who, coincidentally, were ancestors of the Potters." Harry held up the cloak, watching how light seemed to both reflect from and pass through its mysterious fabric. "If this is really one of these Hallows, is that why Dumbledore was so interested in it?" "Possibly," Gornick acknowledged. "Albus Dumbledore has shown historical interest in legendary magical artifacts. Whether he believes the Hallows legend specifically or simply recognized the cloak's unusual properties is unclear. Either way, it's yours now," Sirius said firmly. "Another tool in your growing arsenal." The weeks following the meeting with Dumbledore brought significant changes to Harry's social world. True to his word, the headmaster provided contact information for several magical families with children near Harry's age, leaving Sirius and Remus to arrange appropriate introductions. The Longbottoms were first. Augusta Longbottom, formidable in her vulture-topped hat and sharp gaze, brought her grandson Neville to the London townhouse for tea. Despite his grandmother's imposing presence, Neville himself was painfully shy, a round-faced boy who seemed perpetually anxious, as if expecting criticism at any moment. "It's really nice to meet you," Harry said warmly, trying to put the other boy at ease as they sat in the garden while their guardians conversed inside. "Our parents were friends, did you know?" Neville nodded hesitantly. "Gran told me. Your mum was my godmother, apparently." "Really? I didn't know that," Harry said, surprised and touched by this additional connection. "Gran says our parents fought together against you-know-who." Neville poked nervously at the soil of a potted plant beside him. "Yours died heroes. Mine might as well have." The raw pain in that simple statement struck Harry deeply. "I'm sorry about your parents," he said quietly. "It's different from how I lost mine, but still horrible." Neville looked up, seeming surprised by the genuine understanding. "Most people just get uncomfortable and change the subject when my parents come up. Or they look at me like they're expecting me to be as brave and talented as they were." "That sounds familiar," Harry said wryly. "Everyone has expectations about the boy who lived, without knowing anything about the actual boy." A tiny smile cracked Neville's anxious expression. "I guess we have that in common, then. Different expectations, same problem." That initial connection gradually blossomed into genuine friendship as the boys discovered more common ground. Neville's passion for herbology complemented Harry's broader magical education, and Harry's confidence seemed to gradually inspire Neville to stand a little taller, speak a little more assertively. Other introductions followed. The Weasleys proved to be a whirlwind experience, a large, boisterous family with more children than Harry could initially keep straight. Ron, the youngest son, was friendly if somewhat tactless, while the twins Fred and George reminded Harry of the stories Sirius told about the Marauders' pranking days. Ginny, the youngest and only girl, barely spoke in Harry's presence, though she watched him with wide, curious eyes. Susan Bones brought a pragmatic perspective shaped by her upbringing with her Aunt Amelia, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Harry also met Hermione Granger, a brilliant Muggleborn who had been identified early by the Hogwarts Registry and provided with introductory materials about the magical world she would eventually enter. These new friendships enriched Harry's life immeasurably. While his education remained rigorous, he now balanced it with Quidditch games in the Weasley's orchard, greenhouse sessions with Neville, chess matches with Ron, and passionate discussions about magical theory with Hermione, who devoured knowledge with an enthusiasm that matched his own. Through these interactions, Harry gained perspectives on the wizarding world beyond what his adult mentors could provide, the uncensored viewpoints of children from various backgrounds, each experiencing magic and its social structures differently. Meanwhile, the information exchange with Dumbledore proceeded cautiously. After establishing magical contracts that limited how shared knowledge could be used, Harry provided certain findings from the Goblin analysis of his Scar Horcrux, while Dumbledore shared his research on Voldemort's past and potential Horcrux locations. Tom Riddle was obsessed with significant magical artifacts, Dumbledore explained during one of their occasional meetings, always held at Gringotts under similar conditions to their first. Particularly those connected to Hogwarts founders. "I believe he may have used Salazar Slytherin's locket, Helga Hufflepuff's cup, and possibly something of Ravenclaw's as Horcrux vessels." "What about Gryffindor?" Harry asked. "The only known relic of Godric Gryffindor is the sword housed in the headmaster's office, which has been secure at Hogwarts for centuries. I've examined it thoroughly and found no dark magic." These sessions, while productive, maintained a certain formality. Harry wasn't ready to fully trust Dumbledore, nor did the headmaster seem to expect such trust. Instead, they established a working relationship based on mutual goals rather than personal affinity. By Harry's 10th birthday, his life had achieved a balance that would have seemed impossible during his years with the Dursleys. His magical education continued to advance beyond standard age expectations. His circle of friends provided community and perspective. Sirius had fully recovered from his Azkaban ordeal, transforming from the gaunt fugitive who had first appeared as Padfoot to a vibrant, if sometimes mischievous, guardian who delighted in helping Harry explore his potential. The approaching milestone of Hogwarts attendance, still a year away, prompted increasingly focused preparation. While Harry's wandless abilities had developed impressively, he would need a wand for formal schooling. After consideration of various options, Gornik had arranged a unique solution. Traditional wand makers like Ollivander create standardized focuses that draw on common magical woods and cores, the goblin explained as they prepared for a special expedition. While effective, they represent compromise rather than optimal harmony with your specific magical signature. So we're seeking something more personalized? Harry asked, intrigued. Exactly. The wand maker we're visiting today works differently, crafting each wand specifically for the individual, using materials that resonate with their particular magic. Their destination proved to be a small, unassuming shop tucked away in a corner of magical Paris, far from the tourist areas. Inside, workbenches lined with countless samples of woods, cores, and other materials surrounded a central space where a tall, silver-haired witch worked with intense concentration. Mademoiselle Belrose, Gornik greeted her. We appreciate you accommodating our unusual request. The wand maker looked up, her piercing violet eyes immediately focusing on Harry. This is the young mage you described? With the earth-fire affinity? She approached Harry, circling him with evaluating eyes. Yes, I see it now. Interesting combination, stability with transformative potential. Without preamble, she took his hand, turning it palm up and tracing the lines with a slender finger. You've been practicing wandless channeling. Good. Many come to me having never felt their own magic directly, only through factory-made wands that approximate compatibility. She led him to a large circular table covered with dozens of wood samples. Touch each piece. Tell me which ones respond to your magic. Harry moved slowly around the table, placing his fingertips on each sample as instructed. Most produced no reaction, but a few created subtle sensations, warmth, vibration, or a faint humming against his skin. Following Nagnak's training, he extended his magical awareness into the materials, sensing for resonance. This one, he said, indicating a rich, red-brown wood that seemed to pulse gently beneath his touch. And this. His hand hovered over a lighter, honey-colored sample that produced a pleasant warmth. Cherry and rowan, Belrose noted with approval. A potent combination, cherry for intuitive power, rowan for protection and clear sight. Now the cores. The core selection process was similar but produced even stronger reactions. Harry's magic responded powerfully to 3 items, a feather that seemed to shimmer between ruby and gold colors, a small crystalline structure that resembled solidified light and curiously, a fragment of what appeared to be ordinary stone. Phoenix feather from a particularly ancient bird, Belrose identified. Freely given, which matters significantly for magical harmony. The crystal is solidified unicorn tears, extraordinarily rare and excellent for healing magic. And this. She lifted the stone fragment, is volcanic rock from a magical eruption site in Iceland where earth and fire magics combine naturally. She studied the selected materials thoughtfully. An unusual combination, suggesting multifaceted magical potential. The wand I craft from these will not excel in just one area but will adapt to various applications of your magic. The actual crafting would take several days, so Harry and Gornik returned to London, planning to collect the finished wand the following week. Most wizards never consider the possibility of personalized wand crafting, Gornik observed as they traveled back. They accept whatever chooses them from pre-made stock, never questioning if a truly optimized focus might expand their capabilities. Another example of artificial limitations? Harry suggested. Perhaps. Or simple pragmatism, custom wandcraft is expensive and time-consuming. But for someone with your particular destiny and resources, the investment is justified. When they returned to Paris the following week, Mademoiselle Belrose presented Harry with a wand unlike any he'd seen in standard wizarding shops. Rather than a single wood, it featured a spiraling combination of cherry and rowan, the 2 woods intertwining in a double helix pattern. The handle was inlaid with small fragments of the volcanic stone, while the cores, phoenix feather and unicorn tears, had been integrated into the very structure of the woods rather than simply inserted down the center. "13 inches exactly," Belrose noted as she handed it to him. "A synchronicity with your magical resonance number, according to my calculations." The moment Harry's fingers closed around the handle, he felt a rush of magic more profound than anything he'd experienced before. The wandless abilities he'd cultivated were suddenly amplified, focused, refined, not replacing his internal connection to magic but enhancing it exponentially. The wand grew warm in his hand, and a shower of gold and green sparks erupted from its tip, swirling around him in patterns that seemed almost deliberate before slowly fading. "Magnifique!" Belrose exclaimed, clearly pleased. "The wand recognizes and amplifies your natural affinities. With this focus, your earth magic will manifest in creation and protection, while your fire aspect will fuel transformation and purification." Harry practiced with the new wand over the following days, marveling at how it seemed to anticipate his intentions, responding to subtle shifts in his magical direction. Unlike standard wands, which required specific movements and incantations, this personalized focus worked more intuitively with his established wandless techniques, enhancing rather than replacing them. "The best of both traditions," Nagnok observed approvingly during a training session. "You maintain the direct connection to your magic that wandless practice develops, while gaining the amplification and precision a focusing tool provides." This advantage would prove significant as Harry's education increasingly shifted toward practical applications that would serve him at Hogwarts and beyond. While he continued learning standard wizarding spells, he also developed hybrid techniques that combined wandless principles with wand amplification, creating effects that were both more efficient and harder to counter than conventional spellcasting. As his 11th birthday approached, bringing with it the official Hogwarts letter, Harry found himself contemplating the journey ahead with mixed emotions. Part of him looked forward to experiencing the school his parents had attended, forming deeper friendships with his new acquaintances, and accessing the castle's vast magical resources. Another part worried about navigating the complex social dynamics that awaited the boy who lived when he re-entered public wizarding life after years of relative seclusion. Despite Dumbledore's assurances of discretion, Harry harbored no illusions about the scrutiny he would face. These concerns led to a significant conversation with Sirius and Remus one evening in early summer, as they sat in the garden watching fireflies dance among the twilight shadows. "I've been thinking about Hogwarts," Harry began hesitantly. "About houses and sorting and expectations." Sirius raised an eyebrow. "Worried about where you'll end up?" "Sort of. Everyone seems to have assumptions. The Weasleys talk like I'm obviously Gryffindor material, Neville's grandmother practically expects it as a moral obligation, and even Dumbledore makes comments that suggest he sees me following my parents' path." "But you're not sure that's where you belong?" Remus guessed perceptively. Harry shook his head. "I don't know where I belong, exactly. That's the point. I've spent the last 3 years learning to think for myself, make my own choices, find my own way. But Hogwarts seems designed to categorize students immediately, brave or clever or loyal or ambitious, and then shape them according to those single traits." "The houses aren't meant to be prisons," Remus said gently. "They're communities with different strengths, but you remain yourself within them." "Do you, though?" Harry challenged. "From everything I've read and heard, house identity becomes central to how students see themselves and others. Rivalries, prejudices, assumptions about character based on a sorting that happens when you're 11. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I'm not the same person I was at 7 when I first came to Gringotts. Why should a label assigned at 11 define my entire school experience?" Sirius leaned back, considering this perspective. "You know, James and I never really questioned it. Being Gryffindors was central to our identities, almost a point of pride that the hat sorted us so quickly." His expression grew thoughtful. "But looking back, I wonder if that house-based thinking limited us in some ways. Made us quicker to judge others, less willing to see nuance." "Your mother actually had a longer sorting," Remus remembered. The hat considered Ravenclaw seriously for her. She used to say that house divisions were an artificial construct that ignored the complexity of real people. Harry nodded, feeling validated. "That's exactly it. I have qualities that would fit in any of the houses. I value courage, but also knowledge, loyalty, and yes, ambition. Why should I have to choose just one? What are you suggesting? Sirius asked curiously. Refusing to be sorted? No, that would just create unnecessary conflict. Harry hesitated, then continued more decisively. But I can refuse to be limited by whatever house I end up in. I can make friends across house lines, challenge stereotypes, maybe even start conversations about whether the whole system really serves students well. Remus smiled. Very much your mother's son in that thinking. Lily was always questioning established traditions, looking for better alternatives. It won't be easy, Sirius warned. House identity runs deep at Hogwarts. Challenging it will meet resistance from students and possibly staff. I know, Harry acknowledged. But if the prophecy is right, if I really do have to face Voldemort eventually, I need to be more than just a Gryffindor or a Ravenclaw or whatever. I need to draw on all aspects of myself. He looked between his guardians earnestly. The sorting might put me in a house, but it doesn't get to decide who I am or who I become. That's my choice. Well said, Remus approved. And speaking of choices, have you given thought to which electives you might want to pursue beyond the core subjects? This shifted the conversation to more practical matters of course selection, extracurricular activities, and how to balance Harry's advanced magical education with the standard Hogwarts curriculum. By the time they headed inside, Harry felt more settled about the path ahead, not because all his concerns were resolved, but because he had clarified his own approach to navigating them. July brought Harry's official Hogwarts letter, though it contained few surprises given his extensive preparation. More significant was the increased frequency of meetings with Dumbledore as evidence mounted of Voldemort's accelerating efforts to regain physical form. Our sources indicate he has left Albania, Dumbledore reported during a particularly urgent session. He appears to be seeking a more permanent host than the animals he's been possessing temporarily. Human possession? Sirius asked grimly. Most likely. Probably someone vulnerable, isolated, yet with access to magical resources that could aid in a restoration ritual. Dumbledore's expression was grave. I've alerted certain trusted individuals to be vigilant, but Tom has always been skilled at identifying and exploiting weakness. These developments lent increased urgency to Harry's preparation. While his magical education had already advanced well beyond typical pre-Hogwarts levels, Gornik, Sirius, and Remus now focused on ensuring he had specific defensive skills that might prove necessary sooner than anyone wished. We must balance preparing you for potential confrontation with allowing you to experience Hogwarts as normally as possible, Gornik said during a strategy session in late July. You deserve the opportunity to be a student, not merely a weapon against the Dark Lord's return. I appreciate that, Harry said sincerely. But I also need to be realistic. If Voldemort is actively seeking restoration, the prophecy suggests I'll be drawn into that conflict whether I'm ready or not. Then we ensure you're ready, Sirius said firmly. Not just magically, but mentally and emotionally as well. The preparation took many forms. Harry's dueling practice intensified, incorporating both standard defensive spells and the hybrid wandless wand techniques he had developed. Occlumency training advanced from basic shields to more sophisticated mental protections that could detect and redirect intrusion rather than simply blocking it. Perhaps most importantly, Gornik arranged for the systematic hunting of known or suspected Horcruxes based on the intelligence gathered through collaboration with Dumbledore and independent Goblin research. If we can eliminate his anchors before he regains physical form, any restoration would be temporary at best, the Goblin explained. Based on our analysis of the fragment from your scar and Dumbledore's research on significant artifacts, we've identified several likely targets. A team combining Goblin Cursebreakers, trusted wizard allies like Bill Weasley, whom Sirius had carefully vetted before involving, and magical creatures specialists began discreetly tracking and securing the suspected Horcruxes. By late August, they had located and destroyed two, a locket found in a decaying house belonging to the Black family, much to Sirius's shock, and a ring hidden in the ruins of a shack connected to Voldemort's maternal ancestors. The destruction of each Horcrux required specialized magic combining goblin purification rituals with wizard spellwork. Harry insisted on observing these procedures, despite Sirius's initial reluctance, arguing that understanding the enemy's weaknesses was essential to his preparation. The soul fragments resist destruction violently, Bill Weasley explained after the ritual to cleanse the ring. They often attempt to defend themselves by targeting perceived threats, sometimes with surprisingly personal attacks. Like what? Harry asked. The locket tried to tempt each of us with our deepest desires or fears, Bill said grimly. It whispered promises, showed visions, tried to convince us to spare it in exchange for power or knowledge. The ring attempted something similar but with more subtle compulsion, creating an almost irresistible urge to wear it, despite the obvious curse signs. This information troubled Harry deeply. If Voldemort could embed such manipulative magic into objects, what might he accomplish with a restored physical form? As August drew to a close and preparations for Hogwarts intensified, Harry made time for one final, private conversation with Gornick. They met in the Goblin's office at Gringotts, the same room where Harry had first learned of his heritage and the Horcrux in his scar over 3 years earlier. I wanted to thank you properly, Harry began, before everything changes again with Hogwarts. If you hadn't sent that letter when I was 7, if the goblins hadn't detected the dark magic in me. He trailed off, the magnitude of that intervention still sometimes overwhelming to contemplate. Gornick studied him with those shrewd, assessing eyes that had become so familiar. The letter opened a door, Mr. Potter. You chose to walk through it. Never forget that distinction. Still, you took an unprecedented risk, contacting a wizard child directly, challenging Dumbledore's arrangements, offering goblin guardianship. That couldn't have been a simple decision. It wasn't, Gornick acknowledged. The Goblin Council debated extensively before approving my proposal. What tipped the balance was not merely concern for your welfare, though that factored significantly, but recognition of a larger principle at stake. What principle? That magic itself transcends the artificial boundaries we construct around it. Wizard magic, goblin magic, elf magic, these are not truly separate forces but different approaches to the same fundamental power. Gornick's expression grew solemn. The dark wizard you may eventually face understands this on some level, which is why his magic achieves effects others believe impossible. Yet he perverts this understanding through domination rather than harmony. Harry considered this perspective thoughtfully. So by teaching me goblin approaches alongside wizard ones, you're preparing me to counter him with a more integrated understanding? Precisely. The prophecy speaks of power the Dark Lord knows not. Perhaps this is part of it, not merely a specific spell or technique, but a fundamentally different relationship with magic itself. Gornick leaned forward slightly. You have learned to work with your magic, Mr. Potter, not simply command it. To listen as well as direct. To understand its nature rather than merely its applications. The distinction resonated deeply with Harry, clarifying something he had sensed but not fully articulated in his magical education. Where standard wizard training emphasized control and direction, his goblin-influenced approach had included awareness of magic as something alive, responsive, collaborative rather than merely obedient. Will I be able to maintain that perspective at Hogwarts, he wondered aloud. The entire curriculum seems built around the wizard-centric view of magic. That will indeed be one of your challenges, Gornick agreed. Wizard education tends to narrow perspective rather than expand it. You will need to balance learning their methods with preserving your broader understanding. I'll continue my goblin studies during holidays, Harry promised. And practice the techniques you and Nagnok have taught me. Good. And remember that the differences between magical approaches reflect history and culture more than inherent limitations. The wand-wielding wizard, the wandless goblin, the innate magic of house elves or centaurs, these are not hierarchical distinctions of better or worse, merely different expressions of the same fundamental force. Harry nodded, absorbing this wisdom. One last question, if I may. Do you believe the prophecy? That I'm destined to face Voldemort, that one of us must kill the other? Gornik considered the question carefully. Goblin traditions regard prophecies differently than wizards do. We see them not as immutable fate but as moments where multiple possible futures converge and crystallize into words. The prophecy identifies a nexus point between you and the Dark Lord, but how that connection resolves remains influenced by choice. So I'm not just doomed to some predetermined confrontation. The confrontation may be inevitable given the forces in motion, Gornik said pragmatically. But its nature, timing, and outcome remain mutable. His expression softened slightly. And remember, Mr. Potter, that prophecies often fulfill themselves in unexpected ways. Neither can live while the other survives need not be as literal as it sounds. This perspective offered a measure of comfort, though Harry harbored no illusions about the difficulties that likely lay ahead. Whatever form the prophesied conflict might take, he would face it with far better preparation than Dumbledore's original plans would have provided. "Thank you," he said simply. "For everything." Gornik inclined his head in acknowledgement. "The path ahead will not be simple, Mr. Potter. You will face challenges beyond Voldemort, the expectations of the wizarding world, the limitations of their educational system, the prejudices and politics that constrain their society. But you have built a foundation that will serve you well. And I have allies who see me as Harry, not just the boy who lived," Harry added with a small smile. "Indeed. Remember that strength when others attempt to define you by their expectations." As Harry prepared to depart, Gornik handed him a small wooden box. "A final gift from the Goblin Nation. It may prove useful in maintaining certain communications while at Hogwarts." Inside the box, Harry found a set of 3 small mirrors, each in a different colored frame, gold, silver, and bronze. "Communication mirrors," Gornik explained. "More secure than Owl Post, less detectable than flu calls. The gold connects to Sirius, the silver to myself, and the bronze to Nagnok. Simply speak the name of the one you wish to contact while holding the appropriate mirror." "This is brilliant," Harry said, genuinely touched. "Hogwarts will be great in many ways, I'm sure, but I was worried about staying connected to everyone." "We anticipated that concern. Your education at Hogwarts is important, but it represents just one component of your broader development. These will help ensure continuity." The final days before September 1st passed in a whirlwind of activity. Harry's trunk was packed with a combination of standard Hogwarts supplies and additional resources his guardians deemed essential: specialized defense texts, rare potions ingredients, the invisibility cloak, and various protective items Gornik had insisted upon. His custom wand was supplemented by a more conventional one from Ollivander's, providing both optimal magical alignment and the ability to perform standard wizarding magic without drawing undue attention. Sirius had insisted on a complete wardrobe beyond the basic Hogwarts uniform, including both wizarding and muggle attire of the highest quality. James was always well turned out, he explained with a wink. "Proper Potter tradition to look your best while causing trouble." The morning of September 1st dawned clear and bright. Harry woke early, already packed and ready, with a curious mix of excitement and trepidation churning in his stomach. He spent a quiet moment at the window of his bedroom, looking out over the London square that had been his first true home. So much had changed in 3 years. The confused, neglected child who had received that first Gringotts letter had been transformed, not just in magical ability or knowledge, but in fundamental sense of self. Harry Potter was no longer a blank slate for others to write their expectations upon, but a young wizard with his own understanding of the world and his place in it. Breakfast was a cheerful affair, with Sirius reminiscing about his own first day at Hogwarts, Remus offering practical advice about professors and classes, and the house elves preparing all of Harry's favorite foods while trying not to weep too obviously about his departure. "Remember," Sirius said as they prepared to leave for King's Cross Station, "Hogwarts is about more than just classes. It's about friendships, experiences, discovering parts of yourself you didn't know existed. And if you need anything at all, we're just a mirror call away," Remus added. "Don't hesitate to reach out, whether it's about academics, social challenges, or other matters. The other matters remained unspoken but understood: Voldemort, the prophecy, the continuing hunt for Horcruxes. Though progress had been made with the destruction of the locket and ring, at least 2 more were suspected to exist based on the combined intelligence from Dumbledore and the goblins. A team would continue the search while Harry attended school, with regular updates planned through secure channels. They arrived at platform 9 3/4 deliberately early to avoid the crowd that would inevitably form around the boy who lived once his presence was noticed. After shrinking and stowing Harry's trunk in an empty compartment, Sirius and Remus stood on the platform with him, all 3 aware of the milestone this moment represented. "Your parents would be so proud of you," Sirius said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not because of any prophecy or special power, but because of who you are, the way you think for yourself, care for others, face challenges with courage and intelligence." "We're proud of you too," Remus added quietly. "It's been an honor watching you grow these past years." Harry hugged them both, words temporarily beyond him. When he pulled back, he managed a smile despite the lump in his throat. "I'll make you proud at Hogwarts too," he promised. "Not by being what everyone expects, but by being myself." "That's all anyone who truly cares about you would want," Sirius assured him. As families began arriving in greater numbers, Harry retreated to his compartment while Sirius and Remus departed with final waves. He had arranged to meet his friends on the train, hoping to establish some normalcy before the inevitable commotion his identity would cause. Neville arrived first, looking nervous but determined, his toad Trevor clutched firmly in one hand. "Gran was actually nice this morning," he confided as he settled opposite Harry. "Said my parents would be proud of me, that I just needed confidence to show my true abilities." "She's right," Harry said, genuinely believing it. In the months they'd spent together, he'd seen glimpses of the strong wizard Neville could become beneath his grandmother's often overbearing expectations. Hermione joined them next, already wearing her Hogwarts robes, practically vibrating with excitement. "I've memorized all our coursebooks," she announced, settling beside Neville. "And practiced a few simple spells. They've all worked for me so far." "That's brilliant, Hermione," Harry said, smiling at her enthusiasm. Ron Weasley appeared shortly after the train started moving, sliding the compartment door open with a grin. "Finally found you. Fred and George said you might be hiding to avoid being gawked at." "Smart brothers you have," Harry replied wryly. As the Hogwarts Express carried them northward, their compartment expanded to include Susan Bones and later, briefly, Draco Malfoy, a blonde boy whose attempt at haughty introduction dissolved into awkward conversation when Harry simply treated him like any other new acquaintance rather than responding to his obvious status posturing. The normalcy of these interactions was exactly what Harry had hoped for, discussing houses and classes, sharing treats from the trolley, swapping stories about their expectations for the year ahead. For a few precious hours, he was just another first-year student, not a prophesied hero or a strategic piece in adult wizards' plans. Reality intruded eventually, of course. As they neared Hogwarts and changed into their school robes, whispers spread through the train about Harry Potter's presence. Curious faces peered into their compartment, some bold enough to enter with transparent excuses just to confirm the rumors. "Is it always going to be like this?" Harry asked Neville quietly as they watched yet another group of students pass by their compartment, craning their necks for a glimpse. "Probably not," his friend replied thoughtfully. "Once they get used to you being around, being just, normal, it'll settle down." "I hope you're right," Harry sighed. "Then, with more determination, and if not, I'll just have to change their expectations, won't I?" As the train slowed, approaching Hogsmeade Station, Harry felt that curious mix of emotions intensify: excitement, apprehension, determination. Whatever challenges Hogwarts might present, academic, social, or related to his unique position in wizarding society, he would face them as himself, not as others' vision of who he should be. The Sorting Hat might place him in a house tonight. Professors would begin teaching him their approach to magic tomorrow. Students would form impressions based on stories and expectations they'd grown up with. But none of these external forces would define him. Harry Potter had chosen his own path when he answered that Gringotts letter at age 7. He had chosen again when he rejected Dumbledore's manipulations and embraced guardians who saw him clearly. He would continue choosing, day by day, decision by decision, spell by spell, relationship by relationship. The boy who lived had become the boy who chose. And those choices, made with knowledge, support, and clear-eyed purpose, would shape not just his Hogwarts years but the wizarding world itself in ways even prophecies couldn't fully predict. As the train came to a complete stop and students began filing out onto the platform, Harry took a deep breath and stood. Hogwarts awaited, with all its wonders and challenges. He was as prepared as he could be, not just magically but in the ways that mattered most, knowing who he was, what he valued, and how to think for himself. "Ready?" Neville asked, standing beside him. Harry nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Ready." Together, they stepped off the train into the cool evening air, where Hagrid's booming voice called for first-years to follow him to the boats. Ahead, barely visible in the gathering dusk, the many-towered silhouette of Hogwarts Castle rose against the darkening sky, not the beginning of Harry's magical journey, but the continuation of one he had already been shaping for 3 transformative years. Whatever came next, houses and classes, friendships and rivalries, prophecies and dark wizards, he would face it as himself, on his own terms, with choices that were truly his own. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.